Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. It seems your plan worked. Sengoku nodded, satisfied with the Admiral's action in trying to undermine the enemy allies. Okay, and you managed to convince a puppet. Luffy commented, looking at the scene, talking to his companions. Anyway, things are going to start shaking up here, so let's keep moving. Luffy gave the order and they began to walk amidst everyone frozen. After all, he knew Whitebeard would handle it. Nojiko and Vivi, deal with Doflamingo. Luffy said. Jinbai and Alvida, you can easily defeat Moria. Lastly, Chopper, help Usopp. Luffy ordered, and everyone nodded. The rest handle the marine officers who try to stop our way. He spoke, and immediately a group of moonwalk users kicked the air, summoning for them, and Ecchi was quick to launch his swords with it. He launched the same attack he had learned to do with swords, and dozens of them collided with those of the Commodores. Luffy didn't even need to stop as he continued on the path. Even the Commodores were surprised after their attacks were nullified, with Nami emerging and striking them as they fell to the ground defeated. Chaozu, I want you to help Nami. Luffy said, and his dog barked, confirming while running to Nami's feet. Robin. Stay alert, I need you to use your power on Ace as soon as we get the key, understand? He spoke, while the woman continued to accompany him along with the others. They were already approaching the square when Doflamingo decided to attack the group, but Baby 5 began shooting at the 7 warlords of the seas. TSK. Doflamingo started dodging and looked with a furrowed brow at the woman who did not return to Dressrosa, which frustrated him. Are you really going to betray me, Baby 5? Doflamingo exclaimed. Baby 5, smoking a cigar while her hands were guns. I don't see him as my master, after all, my new master is much cooler. Baby 5 spoke and pointed one of her guns at Luffy's head. Now die. She exclaimed, firing a shot, and Luffy exploded while people who didn't know about it were shocked by Luffy exploding. She attacked him? Lucy shouted with a grimace. This is common. Robin commented at the side. This is interesting. Luffy's voice emerged from the smoke as he was enjoying it well, but looking ahead as if he had something fixed. It was the system, while he received a message from it, that Baby 5 was officially a schemer of the crew. This is very good. Luffy commented, and Doflamingo felt someone coming at him at full speed after an explosion. Nojiko appeared in front of him at high speed after blasting the ground below her, and she swapped places with Doflamingo, putting her only arm in front of her. While he felt an explosion coming the next moment and he immediately flew backwards, cracking the ice below him. Alongside Nojiko, Vivi reappeared invoking hurricanes, blowing up even more the ground where Doflamingo arrived. Usopp started a fight with Kuma nearby, as explosions echoed across the battlefield. The Straw Hat's sniper continued dodging Pop-Hat attacks while striking with rays of light shots, while flapping his wings, and Kuma moved at high speed, disappearing and reappearing in that field, being blasted with Usopp's attacks. Chopper transformed into a reindeer, leaving Luffy's group while running to help his friend, and as soon as he got close, his form began to change, growing and growing, while forming another shadow on the battlefield. What is this? Another monster has emerged. The Marines pointed to a 20-meter-tall Chopper, walking into the battle of Usopp as his hooves destroyed the ground. On the other side of the battlefield, something similar was happening as Chaozu reappeared next to Nami, in his final beastly form of Cerberus, launching attacks as they destroyed the battlefield with various elements. Kizaru finally reappeared, his face slightly bloodied, launching an attack on Nami and Chaozu, who had to shield themselves while being hit and thrown backward. This guy, always troublesome. Luffy commented, looking at Kizaru in the air. Kizaru noticed a presence arriving from the other side as Vista leaped into the air trying to cut him. Kizaru appeared at a distance after dodging the swords. Meanwhile, Garuda and Cerberus reappeared slightly burned but clearly alright. Luffy mentally thanked Vista for showing up and noticed Kyuzen still fighting Jazu, who was transforming his body into diamond. Let's go, we're almost reaching the square. Luffy said as the 7 warlords of the seas were already surrounding him, fighting some crew members, and the wall of the square was close to them. Mujiwara. Moria appeared as he was surrounded by zombies, but a water explosion occurred with Jinbai attacking him. The zombies soon lost their shadows as Moria was surprised by this. But someone slid on the ice suddenly and Moria took a hit with Alvida's mace, coated in a thin layer of armament hockey, and he was sent flying away. Monkey D. Luffy is approaching the square's wall. The Marines were frightened while the pirates raised their weapons. "That's it, Ace's brother. Storm the square!" they exclaimed as Luffy led the charge at that moment with the 7 warlords of the seas occupied, except for one. "Look! Someone is in the pirates' path." A Marine pointed as there was a woman standing in the middle of the way. "Yes, the pirate Empress. Boa Hancock, she can stop Luffy. After all, no man can resist her charms." This made everyone immediately agree that Luffy would now be defeated. "Go, Boa Hancock! Defeat the pirates!" The Marines began to shout, while the pirates frowned now. After all, who could deal with this woman? Straw Hat. Luffy, who was walking toward Hancock, heard a voice he hadn't heard in months and looked toward Kobe, stopping a few meters away while even with a clearly fearful face, he still had determined eyes. "Kobe. It's been a while since I've seen you," Luffy commented, but he had no time to lose. "I can see your determination, but sorry, I can't deal with you right now. Can someone take care of him?" Luffy asked the people who continued following him, and Lucy stepped forward. "I'll fight him," Lucy declared with determination, while Kobe frowned at Garp's granddaughter. "Lucy," he murmured, looking at the girl who was still wearing the Marine uniform, but was no longer fighting for them. "I will be your opponent, Kobe," Lucy said, though a bit sad to face her old companions as enemies, she was still determined to save Ace for that reason. Meanwhile, Luffy continued his path to Hancock calmly, while everyone looked at them a bit surprised. After all, Luffy got so close that he was just a few inches from Hancock, while she let him approach. "He's going to turn into stone, isn't he?" the Marines exclaimed. "They are acting strange," Sengoku commented, watching their calm approach. This. Garp, who was still upset by what was happening after shifting his gaze from Lucy and Kobe to see Luffy and Hancock looking at each other, noticed something strange for the first time, as he could now feel with his hockey that she was pregnant and how Luffy was staring at her. It made sense, and now he understood who was the mother of his great-grandchildren. He felt happy internally, but stayed silent about it, trying not to show any emotion. Meanwhile, between Luffy and Hancock, someone made the first move and it was the woman, who suddenly jumped like a woman in love at Luffy and kissed him right there. "What?" A collective scream erupted on the battlefield among both Marines and pirates, unable to believe what they were seeing. "He grabbed her and kissed her?" they exclaimed in disbelief that it was Hancock who took the initiative for that. "He really is unbeatable," someone shouted. "Even the most beautiful woman in the world can do nothing against Monkey D. Luffy. How can we in the Navy stand against him?" A Marine spoke, disheartened. Meanwhile, Hancock parted her lips from Luffy's, who smiled close to her face. "My love," Hancock commented. "It's good to see you well," he responded, touching her waist. "Can we be together now?" she asked, as he shook his head. "We can't be seen together yet, my wife. So wait a little longer," Luffy said, knowing that this relationship between them could be dangerous. "All right, I will wait a bit more, but know that this Empress might die of love soon," she commented, and Luffy smiled. Hancock didn't stop there, as she pulled a key from her bosom, and Luffy raised an eyebrow at this. "I got the key to your brother's chains. So keep it," she requested, and Luffy nodded. Now Luffy just had to remove Sengoku and Garp from the platform and throw the key there. Robin would do the rest. "That's great," Luffy said as he kissed Hancock while the people around wondered how he could do such a thing with the untouchable Empress. However, they couldn't ponder for long, because suddenly everything shook as the stability of the place began to change. Luffy held Hancock close and looked back at his companions, while Whitebeard now wielded the full power of his earthquake fruit model, Tremor human devil fruit, causing Manafort and the sea to destabilize with his fruit. Hugo fighting against the Tenri Obito was a bit destabilized, while Chopper and Chaozu, unable to fly, had to opt for moonwalk. Nami flew with her wings. Many battles continued even in a hostile environment, still internally shocked by the power of the world's strongest man. "Even if the world is being destroyed, I feel so safe in your arms," Hancock commented, one of those lines that even made Luffy cringe, but that was just the way she was. "Hey! This is dangerous." Ecchi anchored his swords into the ground to hold himself steady, while Robin used her fruit to secure herself, and Bippo simply used moonwalk, and Baby 5 created a claw. Lord Whitebeard-sama is furious. Shirahoshi spoke up, and Luffy had almost forgotten her, with her face blushing after witnessing all the scenes with Luffy and Hancock so closely. Chapter 324, War 18. The sea shifted as Whitebeard activated his power, reshaping the entire environment. Luffy was calmly pinned to the ground, but that couldn't be said for some of his companions or even the Marines falling into holes created as the ground cracked, or pirates trying to protect themselves from the fury of their captain. This continued for a while until everything began to stabilize. As Sengoku was crouched on the execution platform, he stood up. "Destroy Whitebeard!" Sengoku shouted as everyone prepared to attack Whitebeard like ants, but he grabbed his weapon that he had stuck in the ground before facing the giant Vice Admiral. He moved his weapon quickly and launched a blow toward the square, advancing through the battlefield and destroying the ice in his path. Luffy saw a KMU appear at this moment as he raised his hand with Haki, making Whitebeard's attack stop because of him. So he finally decided to show up. Luffy commented, looking at the situation while not too worried about everything happening. His limbs finally seemed to stabilize. Whitebeard launched another attack, but a KMU alone held it back once more. Luffy narrowed his eyes. It seems they don't have the Wappo to protect from Whitebeard's attacks, and the Admiral himself must take care of this. Since Wappo was dead, he could not sell the metal he eventually created. Indeed, no one could create it. After all, Luffy bought the system fruit when he left Inai's lobby. Using the ransom money, it cost 2 billion, though it did not seem like a powerful fruit. It was very useful. As soon as this war ends, I'm going to start a large production of metal in Skypiea, create a real weapon factory to distribute to the allied kingdoms. But who should eat this fruit? Maybe Lola? Luffy debated internally, but soon had to cut those thoughts before turning his attention back to the war. Boa Hancock was still clinging to him, and he calmly let her go as she made a dissatisfied expression, but Luffy had a war to continue. "Just stay safe and don't strain yourself, leave the rest to me." Luffy spoke as he passed by her again. "Stop, Straw Hat!" Sengoku exclaimed as all the 7 warlords of the seas had their own opponents and some apparently were defeated, which even gave an opening for Whitebeard's pirates to advance and gain the upper hand. Luffy was walking as a form of ice formed in front of him with Kuzan stopping fighting one of Whitebeard's commanders to challenge Luffy. "You finally showed up, Kuzan. You know that of all the admirals, you're the one with the least advantage to fight with me." Luffy taunted the man as his companions remained alert. Kuzan said nothing and raised his hand, before creating ice arrows and launching them at him. Luffy responded with his flames quickly launching fireballs, while the ice arrows and fireballs exploded in the air, but Luffy's fire had the advantage as he advanced against the Admiral. As he created an ice barrier soon after, the flames exploded on it while Kuzan protected the Marines behind him. "This is getting tough. We need the Vice Admirals here." "Has not started yet," Sengoku murmured, as the situation became increasingly difficult. However, at that moment thousands of pirates began to run to the shore coming from Whitebeard's fleet, not with euphoric faces, but with fear of a group of pacifistas coming from that side, destroying everything they could and killing as many enemies as possible. "So it started," Luffy murmured as everyone watched stunned. All the pirates and captains from Whitebeard's fleet were coming to the middle of the bay while they were defeated by a group of pacifistas much like Luffy remembered from the anime. There were at least about 100 of them. "Are the Marines retreating?" Robin commented next to Luffy. "Yes," Luffy commented as the Marines began to enter the square leaving the bay aside. Only the admirals had stayed with more groups fighting each other on the ice and sky. "Is this getting dangerous?" Shirahoshi asked worriedly. "Yes, but nothing we can't handle," Luffy said, looking at Kuzan behind the ice wall as he protected the retreating Marines. He created a fireball with his hand and launched it again to attack Kuzan. This ball was even more powerful than those that had shattered part of the ice wall. The wall simply exploded as soon as it was touched by flames, and Kuzan was consumed by the flames, becoming melted ice. The next moment, some distance from there, Kuzan emerged from the frozen ground with a frown. "You have strong defense, but you're slow." Before Kuzan could do anything, Luffy appeared next to him and Kuzan crossed his arms as he defended against Luffy's hockey punch, sending the Admiral flying powerfully into the wall and shattering it, with Kuzan falling to the square with the debris, stunning all the Marines there. "Admiral Guan?" they shouted in shock. "Start the plan." Sengoku saw this and quickly shouted as the pacifistas began to become more aggressive, invading the bay, forcing the pirates to retreat even further into the middle of the battlefield. Luffy looked at a KMU jumping on one of the walls, preparing to attack the entire bay, even though there were still some Marines around, while at that moment, the Vice Admirals leapt into the air, returning to the square after passing through the ongoing fights. "Everyone retreat immediately!" Sengoku yelled as even Kizaru began to leave his fight and Kuma, Doflamingo, and Moria, fighting against the Straw Hats, also began to retreat. Whitebeard frowned at his and the next moment everyone could feel a KMU's movement, with his arms beginning to transform into lava. He pointed upwards and began launching his attack with hundreds of fists being fired one after another. The pirates were immediately stunned by the attack flying into the sky, before it began to descend into the middle of the bay, while the fights in the sky had to stop fighting each other to dodge the attacks. "Hey, you damn inferior!" The Tenri Obito could not help but exclaim angrily at Akainu, almost attacking them. He did not hear this. "It's coming for us." The pirates were in a very difficult situation. "I will help." Luffy spoke as he removed something from his back. "Shirahoshi, I need you to use your powers after I make my move," Luffy said as he took the trident from his pocket and handed it to the girl. "Yes." Shirahoshi was surprised as her body began to grow at that moment, as Luffy set her to normal size. "Bippo, I want you to help me with this too," Luffy spoke, approaching Bippo and Ecchi, as Shirahoshi emerged with her size of nearly 20 meters, but not attracting much attention due to everyone looking up at the sky. Luffy cast his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, on Bippo and Ecchi. With them also growing to 20 meters, he could increase their size up to 10 times. Luffy still had a limitation on the number of people he could do this to. After all, he would put his crew of giant people even without their transformations. Both grew, shattering the ground. Bippo knew very well what to do. As he focused on the ground, Luffy did not stop there. After all, he had to at least lessen the impact of Akainu's attack, as he began to explode in a pillar of fire away from his companions and his transformation into a Nifrit as he opened his mouth with a roar and accumulated flames there. Things happened so fast that no one could react when all this happened, and Luffy simply launched his accumulated flames from his mouth and they spread rapidly in hundreds of flames flying against Akainu's fists. Sengoku, Garp, Ace, the admirals, vice admirals, marines, and all of Whitebeard's forces saw the flames collide with the lava fists, which quickly exploded against each other, but that was not enough, as they were not extinguished, just slowed down as they fell to the ground. But that was just the beginning, because suddenly the ground of the bay began to have something similar to the power of the earthquake fruit model, Tremor Human Devil Fruit, with it cracking and the next moment flying into the sky with several immense rocks, with the power of the float fruit model, Flying Human Devil Fruit. "Ah, we have to get out of here." Everywhere, pirates exclaimed, running to get off those rocks flying into the sky, with the terrain becoming filled with various holes. The ice blocks soared into the sky and cried out with the flames, rocks, and lava, catching fire quickly, but not to the point of descending to the center of the bay as they were suspended in the air. Luffy looked unsatisfied, as he returned to his human form, falling to the ground beside the giants and Robin. Even so, flames began to fall across the bay, with Bippo unable to catch them all, but with a much lesser impact if the Straw Hats hadn't acted. Shirahoshi saw this and flicked her tail before rising into the air, with everyone paying attention to the giant mermaid for the first time. The entire world watched as she swung her trident and began to create water in the air all along the edge, while the place was enveloped in a vortex of a water curtain extinguishing all the flames in the area, while the sky was still enveloped by blocks of ice melting with the flames. Did she extinguish all the flames? The pirates looked up at the mermaid in the air with admiration. "Have we failed?" Sengoku growled, but his confused gaze went upward. After all, that giant mermaid shouldn't be able to extinguish the hundreds of blocks of flames in the sky? Until a bad thought came with it. "You're turning the Navy's strategy against itself," Robin commented, looking at Luffy with admiration. "You can say that again," Luffy commented, smiling, as he saw a giant Bippo flying in the sky. Everyone in Marineford saw him stand in front of those blocks of flames, before he pointed towards the bay, and all the Navy members widened their eyes as they saw all that attack beginning to fly towards them. "May the gods save us," Sengoku murmured as he saw all those small flaming rock and lava meteorites flying towards them. Luffy was being ruthless with this. Many people would die at this moment, but he could not mourn for soldiers that his grandfather was a part of. He turned to the other giant. "Ecchi, get ready to create holes in the walls. We're finally going to enter the square." Luffy spoke as they were the closest people to the place while there was no one else to stop them. Chapter 325, War 19. Then he first reduced the flames with the power of his beast. His companion created melting blocks while around flames and cleared the entire bay of flames to have the fewest possible victims. "Are they now launching the blocks around flames to the Navy bay?" Rayleigh commented from his tree, watching the war on the only possible transmission. People scattered below him were looking at all that stunned, seeing the Navy receive the counterattack of the attack they sent to the bay. Both common people, reporters, and pirates, among them the worst generation, couldn't help but look at the scene in front of them with some mixture of admiration and fear. Meanwhile, in the middle of the chaos, all the Navy members who could do something with the burning eyes flying towards them quickly started to act, while the sailors exclaimed at it. Even from a distance, Lucy looked at that dazed, while Akobe lay defeated on the ground. She couldn't help but look at it with her eyes closed. Even Sengoku and Garp also acted, with the fleet admiral transforming into Buddha and Garp flying in the air beginning to punch the flames. The pirates looked at it wordlessly, At one moment they were cornered, and the next, they saw the Navy being cornered. Incredible. The Straw Hats did something like this? The pirates murmured, looking at the scene. That's the power of Shiki. Whitebeard looked surprised at Bippo flying in the sky. This has given us a great advantage. Let's go forward, follow Ace's brother. Marco immediately shouted for them to run. After all, the pacifistas didn't stop attacking them from the rear, as they advanced. Explosions began to occur as soon as the flaming debris began to make contact with the square. The admirals began to use their powers, with Kuzan creating large ice walls that encircled a large part of the square to protect the sailors, who were all scared behind him, unable to do anything but face their death with that attack. Kizaru launched hundreds of light arrows, crossing his arms in the air, that advanced against the attack. Okainu also launched various lava fists to stop what his previous attack had become. Garp quickly began to punch everything in front of him, and Sengoku, in his golden Buddha form, began to launch shock explosions as well, while Ace could only stand looking at all that heat covering the square with the sailors trying to protect themselves. Much of Bippo's attack was quickly destroyed, while even the vice admirals did their part, destroying districts here and there as they could. However, this did not prevent some meteors from getting through their defense. Many sailors could only open their eyes while they were quickly hit with flame explosions in the middle of the square, and some of the attacks flew far away, also exploding the city behind Manaford, with some even hitting the Tower of Justice. Manaford was becoming chaos, with flames appearing all over the place, covering the largest navy structure with smoke. Amid this, as the sailors tried to minimize all the damage, giant cuts appeared and flew to the wall that separated the bay from the square, exploding in various attacks and creating holes. What is this? Some nearby sailors exclaimed, seeing their companions flying with the debris of the wall falling on them. They looked at the holes created with fear, as a shadow emerged from the smoke and Luffy became visible as he entered the middle of the square with his cape swinging with his symbol behind. He's in. He is here. The sailors frowned at this and looked with fear. Luffy was shaking the entire morale of the Navy since he arrived. They looked at him like a monster that not even the admirals could stop. Robin emerged from the smoke while standing next to Luffy the next moment, and Lucy also came running as Luffy faced the entire Navy force in the square. Sengoku clenched his teeth harder than ever, looking at that damned pirate who was turning the war in favor of the pirates, while he had lost thousands of sailors since Luffy began interfering in it. After all, there were still people fallen, unconscious around the area, after his haki along with his crew, and even the government force was not effective against them. But suddenly, 3 figures descended from the sky and 3 explosions occurred in front of Luffy. The next moment, as 3 shadows emerged from the smoke, Luffy cracked a smile at this. "Have you finally come together to face me?" he commented. He moved away from the 2 women as he approached the 3 emerging shadows, who were none other than the 3 admirals. Luffy stared at them, maintaining a smile, while the other 3 kept serious faces, with all of Manaford watching this scene. Everyone follows Straw Hat. The next moment, suddenly, a shout came from the still frozen bay, as Whitebeard issued the order for them to follow Monkey D. Luffy. "Yes, let's follow Ace's brother," the pirates exclaimed, while the other Straw Hats, who were fighting the 7 warlords of the seas before they ran to the square, quickly advanced as well, accompanying Ecchi, Bippo, and Shirahoshi, each more than 20 meters tall, landing on the square's wall. Alvida, Jinbai, Chopper, Usopp, Vivi, and Nojiko also appeared, coming from the hole created by Ecchi, and Nami and Chaochu in their giant forms approached the wall as well. Incredible. From a distance, the prisoners watched this scene with admiration as the Straw Hats led the war. "We should go there. Boss Buggy, you have the most important role in the war." The prisoners turned to Buggy, still holding the Den Den Mushi in his hands, and he wanted to run from there, but what else could he do? He was about to make an excuse, when a stray bolt from Enel fell from the sky at that moment and hit behind him, sending him flying with the debris toward the Navy wall the next moment. "Look! Boss Buggy doesn't want to stay behind Straw Hat and is going to face the Navy," the prisoners exclaimed. "Let's go. We can't let our boss do everything alone, we are his followers." They soon began to run along with the Whitebeard pirates to the square. "It's getting difficult." At a certain point, Kong murmured, frowning, with things worsening even more for the organization he commanded before Sengoku. However, something caught his attention the next moment, as something even worse happened next to him, as a Tenri Obito fell unconscious to the ground of the bay, his body all burnt after an explosion that electrocuted him, leaving a trail of blood in the air. "Finally I've won." Ono mocked in the air, as he finally showed that he was capable of defeating that being, still with the memory of being defeated so easily when he left with Luffy before his training, when he met one of them. Khan could not frown any more while, in front of him, Yamato appeared, still a bit hurt, but standing firm against Kong's hybrid form. Other fights also did not seem to be in favor of the government group, as the Tenri Obito began to feel the pressure and growl at it, seeing another one of their companions being defeated. Back in the square, Luffy still faced the three admirals head-on, and then, his feet exploded the ground, advancing against the three admirals. Kizaru created a sword of light, Aokiji a sword of ice, and Akainu transformed his arm into a huge fist of lava. Luffy advanced, drawing a sword from his waist, with all three admirals striking him. Luffy blocked the three attacks with his sword, with a shock of haki coming from this encounter. The whole place felt the attack the moment they clashed, with all of Manaford trembling at this moment. The three admirals, who were about to mock, as they were confident that Luffy was no stronger than the union of the three, were surprised to see Luffy using the coating of King's haki in his attack too, something he had learned in the fight against Whitebeard a little earlier, after fighting for a full hour against the strongest in the world. This did not make him win, but at least it made him equal in strength against the three admirals at the same time. While battling the three, the sailors could not help but be surprised by this, watching the contest unfold in front of them and wondering who would win. The next moment, all four retreated to their opposite sides, as the admirals flew backwards and Luffy was also thrown against one of the walls, exploding with his body against it. "Attack the pirates!" The sailors quickly exclaimed, seeing Robin and Lucy in front of everyone else, with the latter being a traitor to the navy. They quickly advanced, but the next moment, three giants atop the wall launched their attacks, sending all nearby sailors flying back. The Straw Hats, who were also there, to protect their comrades, as a huge three-headed dog jumped over the wall and landed in the square, and Garuda simply passed by walking calmly, while his feet cracked the square's ground. The Whitebeard pirates were not far behind, advancing to the entrance created by Ecchi in the square's wall. Luffy emerged from the debris on one side of the wall with just a few scratches. After all, a wall could not hurt him. He looked to the side and saw Oars fallen, still at the end of his life, fallen among the wall's debris as well. He ignored the entire battle that was about to begin and advanced to the giant, lying next to him. "So you are a friend of Ace?" He spoke calmly, while the giant didn't seem to hear him, remaining silent and fallen. "He was dying, of course." Luffy touched him while using the power of the More Fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, to reduce his size and at the same time, also increased his regeneration. His gaze returned to Reiju in the sky, fighting against the Tenri Obito. The fight was in favor of the Phoenix. He would have to wait a bit longer before fully healing Oars, but at least, it would keep him alive until then. Then he ended up storing the giant, who now had the size of a fist, with him. "Hang in there a little longer, big guy," Luffy commented and returned to Manaford, while all the sailors stared at his crew and prepared to attack them. Sengoku, returning to his human form, could not be more furious, wondering how things were ending up like this. The navy was increasingly at a disadvantage. The Tenri Obito and the navy team were losing, and there was nothing that could improve their situation. The admirals returned to the scene, coming out of the wreckage they had created with their bodies, but after what he saw, they did not seem to be something efficient to stop Monkey D. Luffy. Meanwhile, in the sky, thousands of kilometers from there, an old man with white hair was advancing at full speed towards Manaford. However, further from him still, another man with black hair advanced through the sky as well, bringing a storm. And even further from there, bringing another storm, a huge blue lizard crawled through the sky as well. All these three had common objectives, which was Manaford, while no one at that location knew of the even greater chaos that the place would become in the coming hours. Chapter 326, War 20. Enel was not the only one to defeat a Tenri Obito. Shortly after, Reiju unleashed hundreds of fire flashes at full power, stunning the sacred knight as he was thrown back, flying forcefully to the ground and exploding upon impact. Reiju flapped her wings, emitting a victorious roar into the air. A lightning bolt shot from the other side of the sky, moving towards one side of the half-moon-shaped square as it passed through the space Lamy was in, fighting a Tenri Obito with plasma powers at that moment. However, he ignored the fight, with no one interfering in each other's battles, quickly advancing to the area, and Reiju did the same from the other end of the crescent. As they passed by each side, they unleashed powers like a bombardment the next moment. Every place between the two ends exploded with elements of fire and lightning the next moment, with the Marines there running and screaming before they too were hit by the attacks as Enel and Reiju approached the square along with the Whitebeard pirates. "We are being destroyed like this," Garp commented grimly, seeing all that the navy was suffering from his grandson's crew. "Stop them before they reach the square," Sengoku shouted, almost putting some desperation into his voice. "Incredible," Marco commented, seeing the ground of elements on both sides along with his companions. "Hey, there's a fallen Tenri Obito." A pirate captain looked at the unconscious Tenri Obito with part of his body burned after being defeated by Reiju. "There's another here. Another one even more injured, in a state that he should be dying after being hit by Enel, lying on the other side. We should take one of them. After all, we can use it to trade for Ace, get the Sea Stone handcuffs." one of the pirates exclaimed. And what do we do with the other one? Hey, what are you doing? He asked more when he saw Squard approaching the Tenri Obito. With a face of anger and tears, he moved his blade. We'll only use one, we'll get rid of the other. Squard said with a broken heart after what he had done to Whitebeard. He at least wanted to take revenge on the Navy and found a good way. The next moment, Squard cut off the head of a Tenri Obito in front of everyone, looking stunned. Did he really do that? This is for deceiving me, Navy. Squard shouted while pointing his weapon towards Manaford. Did he kill a Tenri Obito too? Reporters, common people, and pirates looked at this scene stunned. So, killing Tenri Obitos is common nowadays. They wondered while the elders were so furious that the power castle trembled in Mary Jo eyes. They expected this from Monkey D. Luffy, but now anyone was killing Tenri Obitos, losing all privilege in the world. Did he do that? Okainu exclaimed with so much anger, not knowing that he himself caused this. Since Squard would never have done this if he had not been overwhelmed by anger and sorrow, risking everything to take revenge on the Navy. Enel and Reiju approached the square and 4 vice admirals divided into 2 to face each of them as they began attacking them. Luffy watched this and nodded his head before turning his attention to the front of the Navy. Straw Hats. Let's move forward. Luffy exclaimed. Me too. Imkov appeared, doing a somersault past the 5 giants and landing strangely. Luffy didn't care about that and immediately started advancing towards the admirals while his companions also moved into the battlefield. Luffy. Ace murmured, watching his brother leading the war from the front. You've really become so strong. He couldn't help murmuring. Chaos erupted in the square once again as Luffy clashed with the 3 admirals, moving calmly using their power and Luffy transforming into his hybrid form again as flames of chaos exploded from that area. Wolf. The ground broke with Cerberus stepping onto the square floor, as the Marines looked on, frightened at the giant dog growling at them. They even began shooting at transformed Chaozu, but his mythical beast skin was much more resistant than the bullets could penetrate. He opened his 3 mouths and began launching elements uncontrollably at the Marines. Boom. 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 The explosions began to light up the entire place, while a hurricane started to pick up the Marines as Nami walked through the square, standing out in her Garuda form. Let's go, my sons. Whitebeard exclaimed as he entered through the gaps in the square, while the Straw Hat Pirates were advancing. Let's save Ace. They continued shouting, also entering the fight, as Whitebeard finally began to use his powers, punching the air, before breaking it and starting to launch Marines away with the shockwave from the earthquake. The rest of the pirates continued advancing while Whitebeard struck past by them, destroying everything. Robin used her power to make thousands of arms appear in the crowd, knocking out all the Marines. The Marines quickly tried to stop her and 12 Marine Commodores emerged to face her. Lucy also went to help her, fighting against the Marine officers. Ecchi was walking with his 6 giant swords when he encountered Smoker, Hina, Tashigi, and Fullbody, and had to stop advancing to face them. Moria found himself fighting against Talvita and Jinbai again. Doflamingo watched the fight of Monkey D. Luffy against the 3 admirals and even tried to interfere, but Vivi and Nojiko fighting against him again, and even Baby 5 came to help them. Klima once again found himself with Chopper transformed into his largest form with Usopp also fighting as they launched rays of light at each other. Bippo was about to advance to help his companions but suddenly 10 figures appeared, being members of CP, hidden to launch an attack on the main target of this war, which caught Bippo by surprise with no one noticing them, but Jazu, Vista, and other Whitebeard commanders acted quickly and countered the assassination attempt on Bippo. We will protect Ace's brother's companions. They exclaimed. After all, they were allies at this moment, while the Cypher Paul member agents couldn't react much against all those commanders, with some being crushed by the debris that Bippo threw at them at that moment, entering the fight as well. Manafort had lost all the brilliance it had at the beginning of this execution. The place was filled with fights everywhere while the marine fortress was with flames and smoke among the debris, with the Marines losing all their morale. Helmpo was running with a body in his arms, while carrying Kobe past the Whitebeard pirates entering the square avoiding their attacks and went to a safe place to take his friend defeated by Lucy. I'm going to have to help, Sengoku. We're losing this war easily. Garp commented, looking at the destruction all over the place. A large part of Manafort turned into debris. All the cannons alongside the bay like its structure, were destroyed by Enel and Reijo. No. We must hold on to the limit, our only hope is that Kong wins his fight and can help us. He spoke looking at the giant titan fighting in the middle of the frozen bay against that Tenri Obito, one of the 7 members of the most powerful sacred knights and above him, between the fight of Kuina and her opponent, Lami and her opponent still, Kong and Yamato were clashing against each other. It seems you're right. I'm needed here. Garp suddenly spoke, raising his gaze, as ice spikes fell from the sky. With the power of Shiva, hitting rapidly against the square with some attacks missing after launching at her opponent. The same could even have avoided this, but that Tenri Obito didn't care about the lives of the Marines and those he thought to be lesser beings than them. Garp quickly jumped in the air and began punching some huge ice spikes flying towards them, while others fell all over the battlefield, catching Marines and even some pirates. In the midst of this chaos, blue flames began to appear, while everyone looked at a flaming bird flying through the debris and chaos, advancing to the platform as soon as it found an opening. "Commander Marco!" the pirates exclaimed, seeing Marco approaching. But this didn't last long as Garp appeared in front of him and punched him, sending him directly to the ground, while he was blown up with Marco getting hurt. Garp sat in the admiral's chair and crossed his arms, realizing he still needed to stay there, while his gaze fell on his grandson fighting against the three admirals simultaneously. "You damn kid, so much power in such little time. You should have become the most powerful sailor. And you." His gaze shifted to Lucy fighting alongside Robin against a group of Commodores using the 6 styles, and her using her rubber powers. "You two chose another path. Has this family finally become entirely criminal, except for me?" Garp murmured with some sadness. Crocodile also joined the fight against Doflamingo along with the Straw Hat crew members, deciding to help them. Ivkov also went to assist the Straw Hats, in the fight against Kuma, as he battled his old comrade from the Revolutionary Army. Buggy appeared in the square, still filming the scenes with the captains of the Whitebeard Pirates fleet from a distance. "What shall we do, Boss Buggy?" the prisoners exclaimed. "What shall we do?" Buggy murmured, looking at the fights full of destruction and shockwaves happening all around. What more could he do there? He was just an ant compared to those monsters. He saw how his quest for revenge after Logtown against the Straw Hats was so foolish now, as he watched Luffy fight against the 3 admirals spewing elements as they advanced to the town behind the Tower of Justice while the place began to be destroyed with lava, ice, laser explosions, and purple flames. Buggy swallowed hard and returned to his fan club. "There's nothing I need to prove here. They are all weak compared to my power, so I will just record to show this moment to the world. After all, I need the world to know the power of those beneath me," Buggy exclaimed, gaining some courage, while his fan club had stars in their eyes. "Why is this guy so full of himself? Look at Nineford Square. This is such a powerful fight," the reporters complained, and Buggy disbelieving their words. "The Navy can't win this. They are losing the war and the pirates are advancing. Believe in the Navy. How can Monkey D. Luffy fight against 3 admirals at the same time? Shouldn't they be the greatest force of the Navy, now being held back by a rookie who hasn't even been at sea for a year since he emerged? He hasn't even been at sea for 6 months." People around the world discussed the war that was supposed to demonstrate the superiority of the Navy, becoming a fiasco for the whole world, as more and more Marines fell dead and they lost their strength against the forces of the Whitebeard Pirates and Monkey D. Luffy, who was gaining even more spotlight than Whitebeard himself, not just by leading the war, but by showing the world that his strength was much greater than anyone had anticipated. Surviving the fight against 2 admirals was something that caught the attention of the whole world. Defeating Kizaru left everyone even more amazed, but now he was clashing head-on against 3 at the same time. Chapter 327, War 21. A part of the wall exploded from one side as Zoro and Mihawk continued their fight, leaving the frozen bay and heading to the square while both fought equally with no clear winner. "Get out of here." An officer urged the lower-ranking sailors to run from the area, as he watched the 2 swordsmen destroy everything around them with their clashing swords. "My lord. What should we do? It's not just here, on the other side of the square. Whitebeard's pirates are invading while the Straw Hat pirates are making their way through our forces and facing the 7 warlords of the seas." A Marine with a very desperate look approached the officer. "Trust in the Navy, we can prevail among them. You saw how Garp punched Marco. Trust in the Navy," he exclaimed, trying to boost the morale of the nearby sailors, as the fight continued on all sides. He's come," the sailors exclaimed with a bit of a tremor, as powerful footsteps echoed through the area while Whitebeard approached the center of the place, making the ground tremble with each step. Whitebeard assessed the situation, while many of his commanders were assisting the giant polar bear, fighting against a government group he recognized as CP. Marco was returning to the fight, but engaging wherever he could, as a vice admiral confronted him at that moment. His thousands of pirates were also advancing against the Navy like the Straw Hats, so he decided to join the fight and advance to the battlefield in the middle of the square, starting to push the Marines back with the advance of the world's strongest man. Moments later, the place began to tremble with his shock waves. Meanwhile, a fight occurred outside the square, as entire houses and buildings exploded with their blows. Luffy was punching against a KMU's fist of lava while the area around was destroyed by the clash of hockey, and at that moment, Kuzan and Kizaru appeared at the same time striking him, and he flew off the next moment. Luffy flew through the city of Marines, breaking buildings in a straight line, and as soon as he stopped, Flames burst from him and he rushed at full speed towards the admirals. Kizaru launched a line of light flashes with Ecchi, and Luffy zigzagged through the attacks while dodging them all with relative ease. As he approached them, Kyuzen created a huge wall of ice, but Luffy continued on forcefully to the barrier and punched it with such force that it shattered, creating a huge steam cloud due to the heat of his fist that disintegrated it at that moment, and Kyuzen barely had time to react as Luffy continued his path to him, landing a punch on his face. The usually calm man was thrown with his face contorted by Luffy's fist and flew back to the square, breaking everything he saw along the way, leaving a line of dust clouds through the city. Both pirates and marines were surprised by that object flying at them at high speed, breaking the ground of the square. Kyuzen emerged after forming an eyes sculpture rising from the ground with his form. While he had his nose and forehead bleeding after that, he saw that the fight in the city continued as explosions kept coming from that side and was about to join, but he heard the screams of the marines beside him and saw Whitebeard himself blowing up the area with the power of the earthquake fruit model, Tremor human devil fruit, as all of Manafort trembled with each of his movements. Hey, this is bad," Kyuzen commented as they watched not only Whitebeard launching his attacks, but Chaozu, Nami, Ecchi, Robin, and Garp's own granddaughter, who had no worthy opponent to face them, were devastating the entire square, attacking the lower-ranking marines, and the fleet captains also had an advantage, since the other vice-admirals were divided in fighting the Straw Hats, like Enel and Reiju and the division commanders. He decided not to return to the fight against Luffy, leaving that to his comrades, while he went to the square to fight Whitebeard and the others. Luffy continued fighting against the two admirals, feeling a bit relieved, although Kyuzen was the admiral he could handle most easily. However, he now found himself exchanging blows with Kizaru at high speed, and Ecchi tried to catch him from the side while keeping one hand with a sword and defending against Ecchi's attack with the other hand. They continued this way, as more and more parts of the city were devastated with all three fighting. Manafort continued like this for a while, with battles happening on all sides, from the Titan fighting against the Tenri Obito in the Frozen Bay, as in the sky still with 3 fights there, to the square with Ace witnessing all his comrades and his brother's crew advancing towards him, even the explosions and destruction happening in the city behind him. It had been 30 more minutes since Kyuzen went to help in the square, and while they were fighting, and Luffy managed to bypass Kizaru's defense and made him be launched to the square like Kyuzen before. Kizaru returned to the square as the second admiral thrown by Luffy in the midst of combat. He even chose to return, but a heavily injured Whitebeard, after being hurt countless times in the last few minutes surrounded by admirals, cut off as soon as he created the Path of Light, and made him have no choice but to deal with Whitebeard alone. "Well, looks like it's just the two of us, Ecchi," Luffy spoke as the other admiral emerged from a lake of lava, while the latter growled. "You pest, I should have killed you in the cradle itself." Ecchi growled while speaking irrational things, flying with his fist of lava, advancing against Luffy, who smiled while hitting back against the admiral, and now alone, he could give him that beating again. "I've been waiting for this, Ecchi. After all, I can finally get revenge for what happened at Enai's lobby, and I hope no admiral saves your ass this time." Luffy taunted and overcame Ecchi's lava punch while throwing him backwards. Their fight was just beginning while Ecchi felt the pain from Luffy's hockey fist. Meanwhile, in the square, an explosion occurred as a vice-admiral flew to the ground, with Enel finally defeating him. Too weak. He was about to advance, but saw the vice-captain struggling to face that old man, as she had bloodlines on her body, much more injured than Kong. "The devil wouldn't like to see that woman defeated," he commented, before shooting like lightning into the sky instead of going to the square. Meanwhile, Lami was still dodging plasma attacks, and directing a lot towards the square, destroying the marines with the attacks. The Tenri Obito didn't seem to care about this and continued attacking uncontrollably. Enel passed by them and went up, while he ended up striking Kuina's opponent with a thunderbolt. As she was already preparing an attack and fired, but as the Holy Knight had been electrocuted, he was hit and full. Kuina gave an unsatisfied look to the lightning rising in the sky at that moment. She wanted to defeat and prove she was strong enough for it, but she also did not complain. She saw Lami and Hugo fighting below her and Yamato struggling above her. She decided to help the latter while Enel was doing that too. As Enel advanced, catching Kong by surprise and receiving a lightning bolt at close range, Lami looked at Hugo without his 2 arms at that moment, as that Tenri Obito wanted to kill him in any way. Lami sighed, teleported and began to cancel her room, while she began to run her hand over her sword, covering it with her own room, using her awakening for the first time. She was the one who had the most talent for the awakening of her fruit, and did it when no one else could. The Tenri Obito looked at her surprised as she was above him, but even using plasma to travel at high speed he could not dodge Lami's sword that began to grow at that moment, sending him to the ground at that moment as he was pierced even with his Logia body, since she was using Haki. "Ah! You damned inferior creature!" the Tenri Obito shouted, advancing to the bay. Hugo and the Tenri Obito were surprised by the movement above them. "What? The Tenri Obito was very surprised by this, and before he realized it, a giant blue field, larger than before, covered the area, with Lami appearing by his side exchanging with some ice chips, and she kept her sword still elongating and catching the Tenri Obito, so she had to opt for a punch at that world noble, hitting him unawares and making him fly down forcefully. "What are you doing?" Hugo commented, dissatisfied. "I'm saving you, now shut up." She responded, displeased, and as soon as the two Tenri Obito got close, she used her power once again, grabbing her sword which shrank instantly, and teleporting to the two before appearing in front of him and attacking him with the hilt of her sword, releasing two hearts from the chests of the Tenri Obito who hadn't even reached the frozen bay yet. What? Both sensed danger as soon as they lost their hearts, exploding together colliding with the ground. Two hearts appeared in Lami's hand at that moment. "Looks like I got both," she said, looking at the hearts, while both the holy knights advanced with hatred. "How dare you take our hearts?" they exclaimed, while Lami looked at them and knew that Hugo did not seem satisfied. "I know interfering in your fight, but we need to hurry and help the captain save his brother. Leave this fight for another day." She spoke as she saw the plasma Tenri Obito, launching countless flashes at her. She dodged, while Hugo was hit but was resilient enough to withstand that attack. Lami appeared in the air, as the other Tenri Obito tried to hit her in desperation to get their hearts and turn her into a cube, not caring about the order to bring her to Mary Joyce alive. She disappeared once again, and as the Tenri Obitos were about to attack them once more, they suddenly screamed in pain, feeling something they had never felt in their lives, and they screamed until they felt too much. "We're done here," she said, looking at the falling Tenri Obitos, and turned her attention to Enel, Kuina, and Yamato fighting against Kong. "We should help them," Lami commented, and Hugo nodded, stepping out of his colossal form as his arms healed and he advanced along with the ship's medic. Chapter 328, War 22. Akainu did not have an easy time in the next few minutes fighting Luffy, as he flew with his face bleeding and exploding while Luffy punched him hard. Once again the city began to be devastated, with Akainu's body moving aimlessly through the place. "This bastard," Akainu murmured, looking at the spot from where Luffy had punched him. "You're looking the wrong way," Luffy said as Akainu could not even sense his presence behind him, being struck on his back and plunging straight to the ground at that moment. An explosion rose in the middle of the city while Luffy had not stopped. He put his fruit into full force, striking Akainu with haki. His punches became so powerful, and the number of them as he continued punching the admiral on the ground, became so powerful that it could be compared to the power of the earthquake fruit model, Tremor human devil fruit, while all of Manaford trembled with a huge explosion coming from behind the Tower of Justice. This made the Marines and pirates look towards that side, wondering what was going on there. Akainu is in trouble. Sengoku knew what was happening there. "We are too. Soon we will have to act," Garp said as he watched Lucy and Robin along with the Whitebeard pirates positioning themselves at the location. Sengoku nodded as he now saw Kong fighting against 5 people at the same time and was receiving pressure from all the opponents now. Whitebeard was fighting against Kizaru, and Kuzan was combating enemies when the Red Phoenix began launching countless fire rockets at him at that moment, while Reiju returned to her hybrid form and stopped in front of the Admiral. Things got even worse for the Navy with Manaford shaking from Luffy's punches on the Admiral while the first 7 warlords of the seas fell, with Moria receiving a blow to the stomach from Jinbai with his karate and Alvida hitting him with her stretcher with haki, making him fall unconscious. While the two helped Lucy and Robin approach the platform, Haki, Shirahoshi, and Ippo in their giant forms along with Chaochu and Nami were also fighting the vice admirals who tried to stop them. "Take down the giant trident. Don't let the mermaid continue to throw that giant trident. Someone stop the bear. The 3-headed dog is destroying everything. That winged thing keeps generating hurricanes." The Marines were feeling great pressure at that moment, as they just had to try to stop them under the shadows of the giants. Kuma was sent flying at that moment, while Usopp, Chopper, and a few more commanders of Whitebeard's divisions were fighting against the 7 warlords of the seas. Kuma emerged from the crater where he had fallen, with some of his clothes torn, holes in his skin showing his robotic form, with pipes and energy cables cut. But he had no expression. While he opened his mouth to launch more attacks at the pirates, Usopp aimed his weapon as both shot rays. Chopper took advantage of this moment and punched Kuma, but he was quick enough to stop the attack and throw a wave of force at the doctor in his most powerful form, sending him backwards while he destroyed the square's ground with his body. Chopper. Usopp got worried and began shooting more aggressively at the cyborg. Jazu took advantage of this moment and appeared next to Kuma, and Imkov was also helping him at this moment, while he punched him with his diamond fist, hitting Kuma, as he flew back exploding the ground with his body. "Did we get him?" Imkov asked, while Chopper recovered and moved away some Marines who tried to arrest him while he was on the ground. "No." Usopp murmured while a moment later Kuma appeared, his body even more battered. He barely seemed to be able to stand, but as a cyborg, he ignored his pain. However, at that moment, someone came flying at him, being none other than Hancock launching a flying kick without the 7 warlords of the seas being able to react, petrifying his arm and throwing him back, breaking the ground again. "Stop this!" Bonnie and Sabati cried, watching the scene on the big screen. As Reiju began firing fire rays against Q's, nearby, Doflamingo was gritting his teeth, running from the attacks he was receiving, attacks from all sides. Vista was also in the middle of the fight. He was launching his threads, when Vista continued to cut them, and even Vivi was launching wind slashes in his direction. Doflamingo had to start dodging the attacks, frowning. Nojiko appeared at that moment, behind him as he used his only arm to defend against the next attack from the bomb woman, exploding with her punch and sending him to the ground before creating an explosion. At the same time, Baby 5 launched several missiles in that direction, further exploding the ground. "Is Doflamingo being defeated too?" some Marines exclaimed, stunned as that side was being destroyed, even amid the chaos from all sides. With Luffy and Whitebeard making the Marine headquarters tremble at that moment, they still paid attention to some specific fights, especially from their strongest allied forces. Suddenly, the ground began to transform into thousands of threads, as Doflamingo unleashed his awakening, shocking everyone, while the pirates looked serious, with the entire area becoming several threads, with Doflamingo emerging injured with yet another expression of anger. The pacifistas began to enter the square too. As Sentomaru led the pacifistas, he looked at the scenario not good for the navy and began to act, putting the pacifistas to attack the pirates' rear guard, with the fleet captains, who had no choice but to fight him to not let them reach Whitebeard. Sentomaru looked at one specific fight and saw Reiju fighting against Q's, in a contest with no winner at this moment. He still remembered how the girl had kicked him that way in Sabati, knocking him out with a move before destroying the pacifistas. He still felt pain and decided to get even. Reiju was contesting with Q's while she had an advantage against the Admiral's element when she felt a rain of rays coming towards her at that moment. "What?" she exclaimed, putting her phoenix wing in front to protect herself as the attack exploded above her and flew backward with the force of the impact, hurting herself a little. Quickly, she used her power to heal, but could not help feeling a bit of anger from the attack from the side. At the same time, an explosion occurred suddenly behind her, while the ground was dug up with a line of dust rising, coming from the city where Luffy was fighting Akainu, as she was next to the execution platform. Q's, who was also surprised by the pacifista's attack on his opponent, frowned with the explosion arising. And he even saw Reiju being caught by it and ended up right in front of the execution platform, at a point below it, before anyone else got there. What is happening here? The surrounding Marines looked back, being the last line between the pirates and the platform. Sengoku and Garp, still sitting in the Admiral's chair, frowned with the smoke disappearing and an individual fallen on the ground at the tip of the explosion. Akainu appeared and was all battered. Meanwhile, ahead, the shadow of Luffy carrying Reiju in his arms appeared. "How have you been, my wife?" Luffy asked with a small smile to Reiju, while she, already healed from the attack of the pacifistas, just clicked her tongue and seemed to mock him, but gave a shy smile a moment later. Luffy just smiled and stood her up beside him, while his attention returned to the man fallen in front of him. "Are you going to stay there all hurt?" Luffy asked as Akainu struggled to get up and looked at Luffy with hatred. Luffy suddenly stopped smiling as he walked up to the Admiral, with all the Marines watching that frightened. "This is for you almost killing my sister to get at me in an ice lobby," Luffy commented with a dangerous tone and quickly drew his pistol from his waist with a stone bullet, aimed to kill Akainu at that moment while he squeezed the trigger. However, he had to move away, jumping from there as 2 explosions occurred at the same time in the place where he was, with 2 people trying to attack him. Being Sengoku himself and his grandfather Garp, as Luffy regained his balance and moved away a bit, the Marines also stepped back from them a few steps. Luffy in his still hybrid form, looked at both frowning, since he really planned to kill Akainu there. "We will not let you kill an admiral, pirate monkey D. Luffy." Garp immediately growled at Luffy, maintaining his determination as a Marine. Luffy nodded in acknowledgement of who he was. "Well, it looks like I'm going to have to fight both of you," Luffy commented as he clicked his tongue and stretched his neck. It was time to start the final phase of his plan. Nearby, Reiju saw Admiral Q's approaching them and quickly unleashed her flames to stop him to let her husband fight the 2 alone, while Q's and Reiju battled once more. Marco also went to help her. Jinbei and Alvida also joined the group leading the war, approaching Luffy with all the giant members, Robin, and Lucy. "I see," Lucy exclaimed, approaching her brother still surrounded by 2 people set to execute him. "Guys," Ace murmured, seeing Luffy come so far to rescue him, while his father kept the Marines busy, even hurting as he was already starting to get exhausted from this battle. Whitebeard also saw the crowd forming in front of the execution platform and nodded satisfied with it. After all, they were finally almost reaching Ace. "Listen everyone," he shouted, grabbing the attention of all his sons. "Help the Straw Hats with all your might, Ace is one step from being rescued," he exclaimed. Yes. Ace's brother is at the last point on the platform. He is facing the Fleet Admiral and the Marine Hero. The pirates soon began to exclaim, while Ecchi saw a breach in front of him, turning into lava and entering one of the holes created by the earthquake fruit. He is good at making treacherous plans, but when it's time to die, he runs like a coward. Luffy mocked Ecchi fleeing behind Sengoku and Garp, as Luffy turned his attention to the two, being the last resistance of the Navy for him to reach Ace. He surveyed the entire situation and nodded. "It's time to finally end this," he commented, taking the key that Hancock gave him, while Robin, still advancing behind Lucy, who was beginning to punch the Marines with the rubber fruit, saw this and nodded, preparing not to disappoint her husband. Luffy was a bit exhausted from using Conqueror's Haki, so he couldn't try to knock down those Marines at that moment, since he wanted to conserve strength for those two, knowing that he couldn't defeat them alone, but could certainly distract them long enough to free Ace. Justice or family, that was what those three facing each other would decide in the next moments, as Luffy faced off the two preparing to fight. Chapter 329, War 23. Luffy immediately burst through the ground and charged at the two opponents in front of him, closing the distance against the first, who was none other than his own grandfather. Garp also advanced towards the challenge posed by his grandson, raising his fist as Luffy did the same. And the moment their fists collided, a massive explosion erupted in all directions. Both fists remained evenly matched, as bolts of armament Haki expanded against each other. For the first time, Luffy was holding his own against his grandfather, the Marine hero and one of the strongest people in the world, albeit he was maintaining his hybrid form, the more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit, and his Haki to stand up to his grandfather. "You really have become strong since the last time, kid." Garp couldn't help commenting, feeling the pressure of Luffy's strike, as everything around them began to crack and fly. Even many of the Marines who were still making the last stand against the pirates were blown away, screaming and unable to do anything but fly. Luffy was managing to stand up to Garp's attack until, even though the ground began to tremble and the earth started to give way, the same platform began to shake with Ace on top, starting to sway. Garp, seeing this, maintained a sparkle in his eyes and he began to unleash something with his other Haki while his hand began to wrap with the coating of the king. "Are you going to use that already?" Luffy couldn't help but complain and also began to wrap his strike with the king's coating, which he had just learned, but was far inferior to Garp's. The strike exploded the next moment, while Luffy ended up losing the battle again, flying backwards, but not too far as he managed to stay a few meters from the impact. He really holds the title of the Marine hero after countless battles with Roger and other big fish. Luffy felt his entire arm tremble and ache after the clash. His moment of reflection didn't last long as he shook his arm a bit to ease the pain, because while the area around him was enveloped in smoke, a glow emerged above him, and he saw Sengoku appear in his Buddha form, using his palm above him, spinning a shockwave and sending him flying back a few meters while keeping his feet to break the advance. "This is not going to be easy," Luffy murmured, but soon a glimmer arose in his eyes thinking about this situation. This is also a good opportunity to learn and evolve. Quickly, he activated his more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit ability, enhancing strength and speed to increase his learning 100x. Luffy sensed the presence of the two in front of him within the smoke with the ground in ruins since the start of the dispute with the two and charged rapidly against the giant Buddha. Sengoku quickly sensed this and placed his palm against Luffy, generating a blast of flames with the fleet of his beast, but he began to lose, being driven back. It also didn't help as Garp appeared at his side and punched him again, feeling his arm bone break with his grandfather's fist trying to protect himself from him. "Why did you suddenly get so weak?" Garp was a bit surprised by this. After all, his grandson should withstand that blow. Despite the pain, Luffy did not complain and his body was sent to the excavated ground. He was taking a big risk, but he didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn from it. He quickly used Econ healing and began to recover instantly. "Luffy?" Lucy shouted without knowing what was happening inside the smoke that Luffy, Garp, and Sengoku had created, but she knew that Luffy was having some trouble in the end. "Let's go, we're almost there," Robin commented as one of the vice admirals in front of her also helped the Marines in the last line. "We're not going to let you through," Tsuru said. She was doing her part and more vice admirals began to emerge. Dalmatian, Cancer, Yamakaji, Strawberry, Doberman also landed with the Marines. "The vice admirals are helping us." The Marines gained some morale, but in the next moment, all 5 admirals had to defend themselves against Ecchi, Nami, Shirahoshi, Chaochu, and Gippo, who attacked appearing behind Robin and Lucy. This is bad. Tsuru frowned as she looked around. A fight between the Vice Admirals and the Straw Hats in giant forms began. Isn't there anyone weak in this crew? She couldn't help but murmur as she saw the Vice Admirals start to lose the advantage to some of them and others managing to hold them equally. Miss Tsuru. Please. Let me through to save Ace. Lucy exclaimed as she approached the Vice Admiral. Sorry, girl, but I'm fighting against the pirates. It's a pity you chose this side, you could have been the future of the Navy. She commented sadly to Lucy. But now we are enemies and I intend to stop you. She stated finally. Luffy told me that I can make my own justice without needing the Navy, so I won't let my family die. She exclaimed, advancing with gear second, but was quickly struck by Tsuru and thrown to the ground. You will need much more to defeat me, girl. Tsuru spoke calmly. An explosion occurred behind her at that moment while Luffy, Garp, and Sengoku continued the fight, blowing up the entire place. Tsuru took her attention off the pirates in front of her for a moment because of the chaos they were causing, even blocking the view of the execution platform with a smoke cloud from the attacks, until she saw a shadow grow in front of her. Robin activated her fruit, creating a giant red demon filled with hands. This is huge too! The Marines exclaimed, as Robin created a 20-meter demonic copy of herself like the others and began attacking Tsuru, who quickly punched back with Haki. The Marines weren't just watching, because suddenly a group of pirates with fleet captains and division commanders approached that line as they quickly began to enter and destroy the Marine resistance as Whitebeard had asked them to help the Straw Hats. We're almost at the platform. They exclaimed as the Marines began to fall and they made their way through. As Lucy joined the fight again with Robin against Tsuru, footsteps began heading their way and Whitey Bay, Dama, Guy, the Calvin brothers, and Ramba, who were fleet captains, appeared in the middle of the fight. You guys, go. We'll hold her. Whitey Bay requested while Robin nodded and began to exit her transformation and ran with Lucy, crossing the line and entering the area where Luffy was fighting against Garp and Sengoku. What? Sengoku in his Buddha form saw this and frowned as he ran towards the girls trying to reach the platform in front of them. Luffy was all beaten up, but certainly gaining a lot from it. While he continuously generated healing, he saw Sengoku's movement and switched his devil fruit to speed while appearing at the side of the Buddha, catching him off guard. You're not going to stop them, he exclaimed before switching to strength and delivered one of the most powerful punches he had ever done, coating it with even more powerful King's Haki than he had done so far, while even with his golden layer, it buckled under the pressure of his punch with all his powers and Sengoku flew backward, exploding the ground as he even moved away from the location. Luffy took the opportunity with only Garp, who was coming at full speed towards him, took the key from his pocket and threw it forward with all his might, but the key suddenly stopped in the air and he didn't wait because he exploded the ground and went for Garp with everything he had. Robin. I'm counting on you. Luffy shouted as loudly as he could while his voice ran across the battlefield and he advanced forward, clashing against a frowning Garp. This caught the attention of the entire battlefield, Kong in the air in his beast form fighting against so many opponents, and beginning to feel the pressure from it, looked towards it clenching his teeth. Mihawk and Zoro, who were fighting at a distance, slightly away from the center of the square, also felt it. It seems you managed to free the prisoner after all, he commented while Zoro smiled and they exchanged more blows with their blades. Go my love. Hancock exclaimed forward, as a battered Kuma started to fall to the ground, finally defeated by the group fighting against him. Go Luffy. Robin. Lucy. Usopp shouted nearby. Go guys. Chopper said in his giant form, making many people look at him bizarrely at that moment. Doflamingo, who was trying to kill Crocodile, who fought alongside the Straw Hat Pirates and some division commanders against the 7 warlords of the seas with his awakened fruit, was starting to lose. Everyone knew that the peak of the war had arrived. Okainu, from beneath the earth, tried to create a lava eruption, but it was already too late. Kyuzen fighting against Reiju and other division captains, looked worried. This is very bad. How scary. Kizaru commented while still maintaining his fight against Whitebeard. He even tried to use his fruit, but it was quickly cut off by Newgate once again. Don't think about stopping the kids, after all, this is their era. Whitebeard said with a smile, while looking at the 2 girls running and Luffy fighting against Garp. Go. Save Ace. The pirates began to exclaim, from the lower ranks, captains, and commanders. All exclaimed as they saw them advancing to the execution platform at that moment. Meanwhile, the Marines felt increasingly defeated. They had already lost a lot in this war, and losing the prisoner too was a final blow to their will to fight. Time seemed to slow down at that moment, as Sengoku returned from the other extreme side of the square with blood running down his face, advancing at all the speed he could, while the key that Luffy had thrown and stopped in midair, was soon engulfed by the force of collision between Luffy and Garp. But in the midst of all the smoke and debris, it began to move. Luffy had activated his negative speed on the key as soon as he threw it, cancelling the effect a little later, which could delay its movement for 5 seconds until returning to normal. The 5 seconds finally passed and it suddenly shot towards Ace at that moment, while he could hardly react to everything that was happening, barely seeing the key flying towards him. Robin saw this and quickly crossed her arms. "Cease fleur!" she exclaimed, and 2 arms appeared on the executioners next to Ace, while their necks were broken and 2 final hands emerged on Ace, who barely had time to react with one of those hands catching the key thrown by Luffy. She immediately grabbed the key and fitted it into the hole of the chains that held the prisoner. Everyone with good hockey to see the situation, Garp, Sengoku, Okainu, Kizaru, Kyuzen, Kong, all the vice admirals, and many other officers, had their throats choked at that moment. On the pirate side, it was different, as all those who knew what was happening on the other side of the smoke explosion created by Luffy and Garp wore a big smile on their faces. The next moment, Robin turned her hand and unlocked the chains that held Ace. Chapter 330, War 24. The sound of chains falling onto the platform stood out amid all that chaos as everyone present looked towards it, the hands Robin had created disappearing. Ace suddenly felt free, staring ahead in disbelief that he had finally lost his bindings. "I'm free," he murmured as he finally removed his arms from behind his back, looking at his hand. "See," he heard Lucy shouting from below the platform. "Lucy," he murmured as he finally seemed to understand what was happening there. He was finally free. Boom. Explosions occurred shortly after, while Luffy continued to fight. Garp and Sengoku also got involved nearby. "What are you doing? Get your band out of there and let's return to the sea." Luffy's voice echoed through Manafort with Ace looking at his brother. "Yes," he commented as flames began to emerge, finally showing the whole of Manafort and the world that he was free. As all the forces of the Navy and the world government gritted their teeth, all the pirates and their allies opened their eyes to see Ace stand up before raising his fist upwards with flames and creating the Whitebeard flag in forms of red flames atop Marineford, as he exploded for all to see. A silence lasted only a second before everyone opened their mouth. "Ah!" The sound was heard throughout the square as all the pirates in unity made their collective cry, overshadowing all sounds of Manafort, making the place tremble, while the pirates of Whitebeard exclaimed in a joint union of emotion and joy, for finally the one they were here fighting and losing their brothers for was finally free, their goal after all the sacrifice, was finally achieved. "We did it, Ace is free. We showed the Navy what happens when they try to execute one of our brothers. Now we can return to the new world, let's go folks. We did it, Ace is free." Exclamations echoed throughout the place as everyone celebrated and the sailors looked on in a state of defeat as the flames consumed the place until they disappeared. "Looks like that kid is finally loose," Whitebeard murmured with a smile, while Kizaru still had his mouth open and forehead furrowed next to him. "Kobe. This is bad," Helmpo shouted with his hand on his head at a distance. Kobe looked dazed at this. He had just woken up after being knocked out by Lucy, and as soon as he saw the battle he was shocked. "You really did it, Luffy," he murmured. Despite seeing many comrades dying in this war, he couldn't not say that this was amazing. "Boss Buggy. They did it," a prisoner murmured. "They really managed to rescue Ace from the fist of fire." Another murmured, equally surprised. Everyone in the group looked at it dazed a little near the entrance of the square while filming the flames in the sky. "They did it," Buggy commented in front of the group as he turned the camera to the whole event. "He did it," someone murmured at that moment in sympathy. "This is amazing. The Navy is going to lose all the face it had after this war." Another commented. "Those damn pirates. How can they win?" Another citizen spoke, clearly on the side of the Navy. The whole world was watching this shocking scene where Ace of the Fire Fists gained his freedom while the pirates maintained morale. The Navy and the people who believed in it had the opposite effect. "See," Didin exclaimed from the Goa square next to the ring as she screamed crying. "He's safe. Ace managed to get free. Thank goodness," she continued exclaiming. Whoop Slap didn't shout like her, but smiled satisfied with the direction of the war, though he didn't want to show his satisfaction publicly. The same could not be said of the Queen. "Luffy and his friends did it. This is so good," she exclaimed joyfully while clapping, and her ministers tried to get her not to show so much favor openly. The whole world was watching this scene, while they discussed whether it was good or bad, while in the war, the one who was the center of attention at that moment, looked at the battlefield. Ace smiled while enveloped in flames around his body and placing his hand on his hat, he finally jumped from the platform, landing at her feet the next moment, while smiling and looking at all of Marineford. "See," Lucy exclaimed as she jumped into a hug with him. "It's good to see you too, Lucy." He spoke, affectionately touching his sister while looking at the Marines around them, with some still being held by the captains of Whitebeard's fleet and the Straw Hats. "We should get out of here now." he said as Luffy nodded and Robin was also ready to start leaving. He quickly prepared his flames and launched them at the nearby marines who were raising their weapons against Ace, as they exploded and flew away the next moment. "Come on, the path is clear," the pirate captains exclaimed as they cleared the way for him. Saru had been buried in the ground after so many captains fought against her. The giant straw hats also quickly threw some defeated vice admirals to the ground. Nami, Bebo, and Shirahoshi managed to defeat their opponents, while Chaochu and Ecchi still had some difficulty. "Let's go," Robin commented as they began to run through the space opened by their comrades. "This isn't going to happen," Sengoku exclaimed as Luffy exchanged blows with Garp, but he quickly moved to stand in front of the fleet admiral. Even taking a hit, he wouldn't let Ace be stopped, as his body exploded against the ground, but successfully preventing Sengoku from advancing against Ace. Kong was also having a very bad situation, starting to lose the battle a while ago, and even in his most powerful form, he couldn't deal with all those pirates. What? He felt a blade enter him, with Lami using her awakening, as the other Straw Hats found an opening in his defense. He barely had time to react as an internal shock was made by Lami at that moment and he felt immense pain. "Ah!" He couldn't help but exclaim as the sword grew towards the still frozen bay. Enel, Hugo, Yamato, and Kuina didn't stand still as they launched their attacks downward as well. As he hit the ground exploding, all the other attacks immediately exploded at the same point, making the whole bay crack, and even the ships there from Whitebeard begin to be dragged with the force of the elements, and even the bodies of the defeated Tenri Obitos flying. "That mortal is defeated," Enel said, feeling his unconscious body with Haki. "Luffy managed to save Ace, we should help him now," Yamato commented as everyone nodded and immediately went to the square with Enel advancing faster. "That damn guy is planning something." Luffy was holding Garp and Sengoku while still learning to control his king's Haki more, but he was looking over the battlefield searching for Akainu who had yet to appear, keeping hidden somewhere. "Garp." Sengoku was frustrated and looked grimly at his partner fighting against his grandson together. "Yes. This kid. He is getting stronger and stronger." Garp murmured with surprise and dazed eyes at a battered Luffy in front of him, his arm broken and his face all bloody, but he had that damn healing that always brought him back to the battle a moment later. Luffy was taking advantage of all this as much as he could to gain as many benefits as possible before leaving. Even while holding against those two and learning, he could already feel his body beginning to reach its limit. After all, he has been fighting since Impel Down and abusing his Haki, while taking hits and using healing, something that consumed his great stamina. He had to engage in combat again as Garp and Sengoku advanced against him. Meanwhile, Whitebeard still stood in front of Kizaru, but he saw that at that moment, Whitebeard felt a twinge in his heart. After all, he was already quite wounded and his body was no longer young. Kizaru took advantage and transformed into light while disappearing from there, heading towards Ace, Robin, and Lucy. "You won't get very far," he spoke and crossed his arms. But at that moment a light surged behind him with a bang and he had to transform into light before moving out of the way of Enel's punch with Haki. That was dangerous. Kizaru spoke and advanced against Enel, who used his lightning to fight against the light Logia, so thunder and light clashed against each other in the sky, although Enel was losing a bit in this fight, but he still held firm. Another admiral who was having a tough time was Q's, as he felt the pressure from Reijo, Marco, and some other pirates fighting against him. Explosions started to appear at that moment in the square, with Kuma defeated and fallen. Usopp and the others went to help deal with Doflamingo, causing chaos with his awakening, as the whole place turned into strings. Even with his awakening, he was losing the fight against so many opponents, until he noticed the space turned bluish. "Long time no see, Doflamingo." Lami's voice emerged behind him, and before he could react, everyone there saw Lami's sword pierce his heart with her awakening as she immediately launched her internal shock. "Ah!" Doflamingo screamed in pain as he began to lose consciousness with that attack. "She finished him off so quickly?" Vista murmured in surprise as he saw the ground return to normal and Doflamingo falling to the ground. "It's time to end this." Lami spoke and quickly advanced to cut Doflamingo's head off once and for all, and finally execute her revenge after years. "Corazon. I will finally avenge you." Lami had some flashbacks of her past life, the death of her little brother, of her parents. Doflamingo would just be the first, because her revenge now extended to the government that wiped out her entire city. She moved, seeing her blade getting ever closer to the neck, and everyone there really was surprised by it. The blade began to touch the skin, as it started to make the cut, with blood beginning to accumulate on the sides. She began to bury the blade even deeper, cutting through Doflamingo's entire neck as he had his head there removed, in front of all the people of the world. "I said I would kill you one day," Lami said as she saw Doflamingo there, in two lifeless parts suspended in the air as he fell. Everyone who kept their gaze on Lamy was in shock at that moment. No one imagined that the life of that 7 warlords of the seas would end in that way. Doflamingo was the third Tenri Obito who had died in this war since it began. Chapter 331, War 25. The divided body of Doflamingo fell as Vivi, Nojiko, Bab 5, Crocodile, Baby 5, Vista, and others watched the scene in silence, with Lamy landing on the ground a moment later. "You finally showed up, and in a rather unexpected way," Nojiko murmured. "Well, I've been wanting to kill this guy for a long time." Lamy spoke in a calm tone. "We have to go help Robin and the others." Vivi came up beside and commented while everyone nodded. Baby 5 looked at Doflamingo's head for a while and shrugged. In the end, she saw all the women heading towards the middle of the square after all the destruction that the 7 warlords of the seas' awakening created in this area, and followed them shortly after. "Another 7 warlords of the seas has fallen." This was the phrase that occurred all over the world. "No. He was killed." Someone else reminded, because unlike Kuma and Moria, this one was eliminated like a dog by a member of the Straw Hats. The elders were also not happy about this at all. After all, Doflamingo was one of them, and they were almost roaring from the Castle of Power. But the place most affected in the world by this was Dressrosa itself. People watched the screen of the ongoing war paralyzed. Hey, Doflamingo has fallen," a citizen asked. "The boss is dead." A member of the shock organization was wondering if what he was seeing was real. "Doflamingo died," Dellinger exclaimed. "This can't be happening. Joker is dead?" Treble couldn't believe what he was seeing. "This is not possible," Pika exclaimed in his characteristic high-pitched voice. "He is really dead." Princess Viola looked at it speechlessly from a distance. This really happened. What will happen to this country now? She also couldn't help but feel skeptical and worried at the same time. She quickly left there and went straight to find her niece. After all, she didn't know what could happen to this country now that Doflamingo was dead. Meanwhile, the news of another 7 warlords of the seas' fall soon spread everywhere. Sengoku stopped punching Luffy at that moment and looked frustratedly in that direction. "First Khan defeated and now Doflamingo, can this get any worse?" he growled, and the next moment, he looked up with a huge shadow emerging from all that destruction. "He is coming," Garp commented, and both Garp and Sengoku jumped before that part of the ground was destroyed, with a huge body breaking the ground. Luffy emerged from the destruction a while later, looking a little surprised with Whitebeard appearing there to fight him. He stood beside the man. "You seem to be having trouble, kid," Whitebeard said. "I'm a little tired, really, but I can keep doing this all day." Luffy gave a bloody smile, but looking tough. "You're just a brat, don't get cocky," Whitebeard commented, and the next moment, Garp and Sengoku charged at the two while Luffy charged at Garp. Sengoku was attacked by Whitebeard. As the 4 impacts destroyed even more of that place, raising all the dust in Marineford again. "What should we do?" The men fighting Whitebeard before were lost. They could only watch the fight from a distance without being able to get involved without getting hit. There were still the Straw Hat Pirates who had now gotten rid of the Vice Admirals and were now using their giant forms to attack the Marines. The Admirals were busy, while Yamato appeared beside Kizaru fighting Enel and quickly received a blow from her, sending him down. Kyuzen was dealing with a great force attacking him, and Akainu had disappeared. Hugo and Kuina also appeared on the battlefield, entering their beast forms, beginning to devastate the whole place. Whitebeard's pirates were also running out of opponents, starting to attack the navy from all sides. The Marines were all lost. Their will to raise their weapons was at the lowest point of the war, and they could only try to survive. Ace was running with Robin and Lucy, passing through the legs of his cruise giants, heading back to the destroyed bay. "Come on, Ace!" the pirates exclaimed, starting to follow him. "Guys!" Ace murmured as they continued on their way. "Let's get back to the sea together." Some captains joined the run amid all the explosions. "It looks like they're getting out. Do you want to help them?" Luffy commented, looking at Ace and Lucy. "I think you're right," Whitebeard said and raised his hand. They had just attacked the 2 marine elders while everyone flew to opposite sides, and Whitebeard made his move, exploding the air in the next moment. The place suddenly started to shake, as giant cracks began to appear all over the area. "What is this? What is Whitebeard doing?" The Marines saw a huge gap appear between the pirates who were getting farther away and the Marines chasing them. "Father?" The pirates were surprised with only Whitebeard and Luffy fighting on the other side of the divide, while they remained with some Marines, but all the pirates were on this side. "Listen everyone. Everyone, go back to the Moby Dick and your ships," he exclaimed, and despite the surprise, everyone understood the order. The pacifists. Some Marines pointed out as there was a group of them that were attacking the entire time from the rear while only a few captains continued to fight against them. Suddenly, one of them was taken off the ground with a bite from Chouchou among his 3 heads, and he bit him so hard that he turned into scrap metal in the next moment. Nami grabbed two with her claws, destroying them. Ecchi simply cut them with his swords. Shirahoshi easily pierced them with haki while they exploded. Vippo managed to launch his 6-style techniques at the height. Hugo crushed them just by stepping on them. Kuina exploded them with huge iced spikes, easily destroying them. Nojiko, Vivi, Baby 5, Chopper, Jinbai, Crocodile, and Ainkov also went to help them. The commanders, now free from their battles, also began to destroy everyone along with the Straw Hats. Usopp and Lamy hadn't made any move yet, just watching the battle from above. Since Kuzan and Kizaru were at a disadvantage in their fights. Father. Luffy. Ace commented, looking to the other side. Come on, Ace. We must return to the sea. Luffy will take care of everything. Lucy exclaimed, and despite the frustration with Luffy having to take care of him, after all, he was the older brother, this role should be his. Yes. Ace said in the end as he continued running, but as soon as they took the first step, they felt something coming towards them, and the ground turned red at that moment, with an explosion of lava hitting the three in the next moment. A sea. Everyone who saw that shouted in concern. That place became a lake of lava, while the Admiral, still hurt from the fight with Luffy, appeared from the middle of the lava, his frustrated look gazing upwards. After all, he was in a bluish field, with Lucy, Robin, and Ace appearing in another place after being teleported by Lamy, who quickly acted as soon as she sensed the Admiral coming with her haki. Akainu had planned to catch Ace from behind on purpose and even provoke him if it didn't work, but it seemed his plan failed as he looked frustrated at Ace getting away. You get out of here. Lamy shouted to the three, who nodded and started to run away. In the next moment, Akainu looked up. Before a rain of light rays, Usopp also made his move. Despite looking a little scared, he needed to do his part against an Admiral, while Akainu returned to his normal body after getting a bunch of holes. Lamy and Usopp appeared in front of him at that moment, blocking the Admiral's path, while the pirates resumed fleeing. Looks like everything is okay. Soon they'll be out of this place. Luffy commented calmly. Whitebeard, despite being satisfied with this, remained silent as he looked at a corner of Maniford. You finally noticed them. They've been there for a while. Luffy commented calmly as a giant appeared behind the platform. What is that? The Marines also noticed. Teach. Whitebeard murmured in a somber tone as Teach appeared on the execution platform with a group of soldiers. But he did not have the expression Luffy remembered from the anime, as his face seemed cautious and frustrated. Teach came to the war expecting to find Whitebeard in a near-death state or even dead, but he didn't count on how easily the Marines were losing to their enemies. Despite Whitebeard being injured, Luffy was by his side, which greatly complicated his plans after the fight they had in Impel Down. Teach. The members of Whitebeard's crew looked at him stunned, gritting their teeth in anger at this man appearing here. The Marines look so bad. To think these guys would cause so much damage. Sure, you said as he saw the fallen 7 warlords of the seas, except for Hancock and Mihawk fighting at a distance with Zoro, neither of them stopping their duel of swords, which seemed like it would take days to be decided. Captain. What should we do? Burgess asked, a little lost with the dire situation. We should. Before Teach could answer, the platform suddenly exploded, catching them by surprise. It was Whitebeard who did this, pressing his fist in the air. You want to deal with them? Go ahead, I'll handle these two for a while. Luffy said as Whitebeard nodded seriously. He intended to help Monkey D. Luffy, but Teach was a matter he had to handle personally. Whitebeard jumped, leaving Garp and Sengoku just watching, also frustrated with Marshal D. Teach after everything he did. Well. Looks like it's us again. Luffy smiled at the two as Whitebeard jumped near the destroyed platform, while Teach began to get up with his group, looking at Whitebeard facing them. Luffy was about to resume fighting the two when he stopped and looked at the sky, stunned. What is that? He felt a bit shaken by it. Garp was also surprised, while the Golden Buddha looked with wide eyes in that direction. What is he doing here? His voice was filled with nervousness. Who was that? Whitebeard turned, even leaving his attention on Teach as he felt a very powerful being coming to Maniford. The pirates continued running to the broken wall, while the pacifists were all defeated by those who fought them easily, and Sentomaru was lying unconscious on the ground. They are fleeing, said a marine with a look of defeat. What else can we do? Look at the size of that hole. Another murmured. We're almost there. In contrast to the Marines, the pirates were finally seeing their escape. Let's go. Lucy shouted hopefully. But then the other hockey users quickly turned their gazes to the sky, all feeling danger approaching. Who is it? For the first time, Zoro and Mihawk stopped fighting to look at it. Suddenly, a meteor fell at high speed towards the front of the marine wall, colliding with the ground and exploding the area. What is that? The pirates exclaimed, all stunned, As a shadow emerged and an old man appeared, an elder finally showing himself to the world for the first time in this era. Chapter 332, War 26. In the middle of the sea, a ship was sailing as a pirate group approached Maniford. Shanks looked up at the sky darkening in the distance as the shadow of a huge serpent circled above. Shanks. What can we do? That's Kaido, exclaimed one of the crew members on the ship. Shanks watched with a furrowed brow. What's going on there? Why are so many of them heading to Maniford too? He said with a grim look. Yes, it seems this war is bigger than expected. He's already the third one. First that old man, then that guy, now Kaido himself. I thought we had dealt with him with that madness in the New World, but it wasn't enough. Beckman said in a very serious tone. We should hurry. Shanks murmured, contemplating the possibility of heading alone to Maniford, but it would be too risky for him to get involved by himself, and it was better to go with his crew. Full speed ahead. Then, he just has to speed up the ship, and so they quickly headed towards the eye of the storm forming at that moment. Meanwhile, in Maniford, the smoke from the explosion made everyone running to the frozen bay freeze in place, wondering what was happening, as the smoke began to settle. Who is this? What's happening here? Lucy exclaimed, a bit lost as Ace beside her, Robin, and the others all stopped in the midst of all that smoke, sensing the danger there. Who is this? Asked Jazu with a furrowed brow, while the other commanders and pirates from Whitebeard's fleet looked confused. Even the Marines were a bit in that state, except for the hockey users who were practically frightened as a shadow emerged from the midst of that destruction. The others didn't quite understand what it was. It's really disappointing to see how the Navy has came to this state while all its greatest forces are being hindered by rookies who have just entered the sea, but I can't blame them. The voice echoed across the battlefield as someone emerged with a cane from a small hole he had created. Even our holy knights and Kong are defeated. An old man. Who is this old man? Lucy asked, a bit confused, while almost no one there knew the identity of that man in that place. I don't know. I've never seen him, said a Marine, facing such an unlikely scene in the middle of that place, as he tapped the ground with his cane. It's just an old man. Let's just kill him, said a pirate. Don't make any moves, shouted Fossa as he put his hand in front of that pirate. Why not? Let's finish him off, the pirate insisted. You don't understand. My instincts tell me to get out of here as quickly as possible, exclaimed Fossa again. In Sabati, people also looked a bit confused, not understanding what was happening there. Who is this old man? Kid, with the same confusion about that new character on the screen, asked among the pirates. Does anyone know him? A reporter looked at his colleagues as he shook his head negatively, not recognizing him either. I don't know, I've never heard of this man. Even the Navy doesn't recognize him. Another reporter said. Maybe he's a pirate too? People began to wonder as they talked to one another, some saying he was a lost member of Whitebeard's crew, others saying he was the Navy's secret weapon. That damn man! Bonnie exclaimed with so much anger that she regretted not having gone with Luffy to Maniford. After all, he was one of the most, if not the man she wanted to kill the most in this life. Those who did not know him could only make speculations or wait for someone to tell them. However, for those who knew the identity of that person, it was quite surprising to find him here. Who is the old man? Lamy asked. He came here in person. Okay, and you murmured, escaping being cut by Lamy while Usopp also helped her against the Admiral. Does anyone know him? Teach, although not in a good mood right now, was curious to know who was the person who practically stopped the war. He even looked at Whitebeard and saw that the old man also had a confused look. He is here. Sure, you murmured, a bit frightened. As a former director of Impel Down, he had to deliver some reports in person to Mary Joyce, and had to speak with those 5 people a few times. Seeing one of them was quite frightening, as he knew those 5 elders could be very dangerous when they wanted to and could even make him paralyzed. Listen, if we want to survive, it's better we get out of here. He spoke to Teach with a tone more urgent than usual. What's the matter, Sure you, are you afraid of an old man? Katrina mocked at that moment. Listen here. This. He began to speak. But before he could speak, Luffy was still on the battlefield against Garp and Sengoku when his brow furrowed a bit. He never imagined seeing one of them here in the middle of the war. Although it was a fair action, what he could do was at least warn his comrades, so his voice echoed across Maniford. Listen everyone, stay away from this old man. His name is Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn. He is one of the 5 elders who command the world. His power level is that of 4 emperors. Luffy immediately exclaimed. What? The scream was collective as everyone turned their gaze to that man. You have information you shouldn't have. Jaga Ursha Saturn murmured. That's true. How does this brat have this information? A mental voice inside Jaga Ursha Saturn was heard. It was another elder speaking mentally. After all, they can maintain contact with each other through telepathy. Anyway, let's destroy him here. Jaga Ursha Saturn gave his response. Alright, finish them all. Another Gorosei spoke through telepathy. He's one of the 5 elders? Robin had wide eyes. After all, it was they who had ordered the professor's elimination. He rules the world government. Buggy immediately exclaimed. He is one of the 5 elders. A marine murmured. One of the legendary 5 elders. A reporter exclaimed, sweating. Very well. Since I've been introduced, I shall begin. He started walking forward while everyone immediately took a step back. Today, I will not rest until I kill Nico Robin, Vippo, Monkey D. Lucy, and Monkey D. Luffy. He announced his 4 main targets, surprising everyone. Why does he want to eliminate just these 4? Not even Ace is among them. A pirate murmured, not understanding. Why does he want to eliminate them? Ace exclaimed next to Lucy and Robin, as his arm caught flames. He wouldn't mind facing someone like him, even though the pirates didn't understand why this being, appearing for the first time to the world, didn't have targets like Ace and Whitebeard, because as much as they were a threat to the Navy, Saturn didn't see them as a threat to the government, but these last 4 were different. They were a threat to be eliminated. TSK. Robin murmured and prepared for the fight, being one of the people closest to there. I won't let this old man hurt us. Lucy murmured, getting into a fighting stance as well. Saturn just scoffed and unleashed his haki, and the next moment, a rain of black lightning struck Manafort. Everyone there immediately felt the great power of an elder for the first time. What is this? I'm trembling. Vista murmured with wide eyes. Is there someone so strong hidden all this time? Jazu murmured. Enel and Yamato fighting with Kizaru furrowed their brows. The same could be said for Reiju and Marco against Kyuzn and Lamy and Usopp against Akainu. Luffy was looking seriously at this. He had never felt such powerful haki. We have to retreat from here. We're not ready to defeat one of them with so many opponents dividing us. He had to admit, after all there were the 3 admirals, Garp, Sengoku, and now one of the elders. Yamato, Enel, Lamy, Reiju, and Usopp. Finish off the 3 admirals immediately and go to the front lines to help the others. Luffy exclaimed loudly. He's here. So finally we might win this war after all. Sengoku commented while Garp looked with a furrowed brow. His 2 grandchildren were on his list of targets to kill. They need help. Whitebeard murmured. He is an elder. So powerful. Teach had to admit that this was a force he did not expect. Captain, be careful. They murmured, and the next moment, a shock threw them away, as Whitebeard decided to finish Teach quickly so he could help everyone on the other side of the crater. Besides Robin, Lucy, and Ace, who were ready to fight the man walking in front of the crowd, Jinbai, Ivankov, Crocodile, Jazu, Vista, and many other division commanders like the fleet captains prepared for the fight, while others could barely move with the haki. Hancock also appeared against the elder, even with a furrowed brow at that being, she still maintained helping her husband. Nojiko, Baby 5, Alvida, and Vivi quickly went to Robin's side, while the ground cracked with giant steps, being Ecchi, Vippo, Shirahoshi, Nami, Chaochu, Chopper also appeared in their giant forms. In the sky, Kuina, still transformed into Shiva, prepared for the fight. Saturn found himself surrounded by dozens of warriors ready to fight him. Just insects, he said with disdain. But then, a shadow appeared above Saturn at that moment, and he looked up calmly before a huge fist of rocks exploded him with the ground beneath him. While the Titan had punched him immediately, Hugo wore the same expression as always, but suddenly his eyes shone. Everyone saw the arm buried in the ground start to tremble as it began to rise, and it wasn't because Hugo moved it. Saturn had simply caught his punch with one arm, he hadn't even been hurt at all, holding Hugo's arm with such ease. As I said before, merely inferior beings. He commented and wasted no more time by throwing Hugo's arm upwards with such force that the giant struggled to balance in the next moment. His transformation began as he created several legs around him, releasing his mythical zone with so many unique powers, and Luffy knew the danger that represented not just because Saturn was powerful, but he could simply summon the other Goroseis to the battlefield, and if those 5 were in this place, he and his group were not at all ready to face those beings. Luffy would have to ask Bippo to destroy all of Mary Joy's if that happened, and he knew that man must be aware of this. After all, a rain of meteors would fall on the Holy Land soon after. Zoro saw this and frowned, as he stopped fighting against Mihawk. You're no longer focused on this fight, Mihawk commented, and Zoro looked at him a bit frustrated. My friends are in danger, I can't just stay here fighting, I'm sorry. Zoro spoke seriously. That's fine. You're still not ready for my title. But you certainly surprised me, it might be one of the best fights I've ever had. Mihawk acknowledged. Don't worry, I'll be ready to surpass you next time we meet, Mihawk. Zoro commented. I hope so, I will train as well. After all, I don't want you to try to surpass me so quickly. Mihawk spoke. He saw Zoro's growth as a motivation for him to evolve even more, so he was looking forward to their next meeting. Zoro nodded and disappeared from an area with giant cut marks all over the place, a small result of the fight between the two, as he went to help his friends face that monster. Chapter 333, War 27. Spider-like steps touched the ground at that moment, sounding heavier than the largest giant among them. Everyone stood firm despite the tension as they witnessed the transformation of that being. Luffy saw this and quickly began to grow more aggressive against the two as he advanced towards Garp, exchanging a punch with him as the ground exploded. I need to get stronger. Luffy had this thought as he felt his urgent need to become stronger. He wanted to be strong, he needed it, as he began to feel his soul heating up with this, and Garp exchanging blows while having a greater internal conflict than before. He felt something change in Luffy at that moment. He didn't know, but Luffy was manifesting his hakis unconsciously. I need to get stronger, he said again internally. With every step he heard of the elder advancing against the crowd of pirates, while most of the marines were watching to see what would happen. Luffy tried to react. Boom. The battle on the other side of the rift, Luffy seemed increasingly aggressive, while his clash with Garp seemed tied. But he simply exploded the ground as he advanced once again, as he couldn't just leave there and go after Saturn. Sengoku appeared at that moment before he reached Garp, and because Luffy was so focused on ending this fight, he lost a bit of concentration and received an attack from Sengoku while feeling his body being sent to the ground, as he saw his vision fill with concrete as he was buried there. I need to get stronger. This thought appeared again, as he felt flames appear and explode in front of him while Garp and Sengoku felt the explosion coming with Luffy appearing, rising from the ground as he rose up high with his wings and began to launch powerful purple flames enough to create a huge explosion. The flame bullet flew like the one he launched at Whiskey Peak to stop the Baroque Works fleet, which decimated countless ships. Sengoku and Garp felt the pressure and danger of that attack as Luffy threw it over them. It was much bigger due to Luffy having increased the power of the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit. Garp and Sengoku launched an impact with Haki, but to dodge the attack while it hit against their Haki for a few seconds before they could dodge the attack, flying into the sea, and the next moment it exploded. Manaford was illuminated as a huge explosion occurred the next moment, as big as Manaford itself. Boom! The explosion created such a large impact that the place trembled. Garp, Sengoku, and even Whitebeard and Saturn, as well as the others, looked at that impact with wide eyes, while the impact came right after with the vortex making everything fly and shake. This kid had the power to destroy the entire Manaford. All this time, Sengoku had to swallow dry for this as the explosion finally calmed down at that moment. Whitebeard just looked with wider eyes than he could make. So this damn rookie has the power to destroy an island with one attack. Saturn murmured. That was expected. Look at the crew he commands, so many powerful people and so many users with King's Haki. A telepathic voice from another elder spoke. He already has so much power, but it will still be easy to deal with. Another elder spoke. Yes, let's start with this one, soon I will be going to kill him. Saturn commented and took another step, before everyone finally felt the first attack of the elder, because in the next moment, everyone who was in front of him, found themselves being thrown backwards while their bodies fell burying in the earth, backwards, or flying to the sky. What did he do? How did he do it? Everyone thought at the same time. Luffy saw this while he was suspended in the air and did not waste time as he advanced against his grandfather. I need to get stronger, he murmured. You are getting irrational like this, kid. Garp complained while exchanging another fist against Luffy as his grandson continued to seem to react again, manifesting his hakis unconsciously, but this was also harming him. Clear your mind. Don't let your worries dominate you. Garp spoke in the midst of the clash, surprising Luffy with his grandfather teaching him there, even though they were enemies. You can save Luffy and Ace from that situation. You need to be stronger. Garp had this thought, wanting to believe in Luffy internally. Luffy tried to attack him, but again was thrown back without many changes from before. I need to get stronger. He kept thinking this as he dodged an attack from Sengoku, who started attacking him there, more fiercely after seeing Luffy's attack that could simply destroy Manaford. Luffy continued to dodge before throwing a punch that dragged the Buddha a few meters while defending himself with Luffy's arm. Luffy felt something, he could feel his strength increasing at that moment, as if the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit was reacting to his desire to become stronger. I can feel it. 120 times, that's my limit. Luffy commented as he began to feel his speed enter a state of 120 times, exploding the ground as he flew like a flash. Sengoku and Garp did not expect such a big change, and Sengoku was the first to be punched by Luffy, advancing to Garp right after receiving a blow from his nephew, while both were sent flying on that side of Manaford. Luffy stopped paying attention to them while his gaze fell to the battle happening there in the middle. Zoro had emerged and tried to cut the elder, who stopped him at first, and they engaged in a fight between the two, but shortly into the fight, Luffy saw his swordsman being hit and thrown back. Luffy gritted his teeth as Garp again came back to fight him, and Sengoku right behind. He knew that even with his increased strength, it wasn't enough to defeat them. I still need to get stronger, he murmured internally. As Garp advanced against him, and he did not stay behind, while throwing a punch at him. His haki continued to manifest unconsciously. Luffy exchanged punches with Garp while seeing a concern in his grandfather's eyes. He was worried about his family. Come on, kid, you can save them, you need to get stronger. He heard Garp's voice, which was practically begging him to do something. I'm trying. Luffy responded with concern, as he continued to counter Garp's punch. Do you want power? It was at that moment that an internal voice suddenly emerged. Do you want power? The voice repeated. What is this? Luffy murmured as the whole place exploded with the clash. He had not heard this voice since the event at Kokoyasi village. It was his mythical zone. For some reason it was also manifesting. Do you want to get stronger? The voice of Ifrit once again resonated in his consciousness. He gritted his teeth. Yes. He yelled, all while defending himself from the external attack. But Sengoku hit him again. Unleash your power. But there will be a price. He heard this as he stood up. The situation in front of the square was not good at all, as everyone was thrown back once again. No one could confront the elder head-on, as they launched all their elements and power at him together, but the elder always came out without a scratch, no matter what they used on him. Price. Luffy murmured and unconsciously received all this information from his fruits. The price was that he could not use his fruits for a while as he forcibly released his power. But also if he used his maximum abilities, he would be a common user for a while, but still with the weaknesses. So be it. I need to increase my strength, Luffy admitted, as he began to give in to the maximum strength of one of his fruits. He felt at that moment his more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, enter its current maximum potency, while everything was in slow motion. I feel like I can do anything. That my limits are all broken. Luffy murmured, feeling that he had reached his peak. Garp and Sengoku prepared to fight as they had several injuries after fighting so much with Luffy, felt that the pirate in front of them had changed. Luffy. Garp murmured, as he felt his grandson still unconsciously releasing his haki, but he suddenly became extremely dangerous, seeing him close his eyes for a moment before opening them again. The situation was not easy at all, and even against so many, Saturn was crushing them. Hancock was fighting him now, but she found herself cornered while everyone had been thrown back. Whitebeard was trying to do something as he began to crush Teach's pirates, unable to do anything with Whitebeard still being in a much better state than he had anticipated. Alright. I'll do this. Luffy looked at his two adversaries. Release 200 times, 100 times in speed and 100 times in strength. Luffy murmured as he felt his body become much stronger. He was now not only fast but powerful. He disappeared the next moment. Garp immediately felt his speed as before while predicting his attack with his haki, but as soon as the two fists collided, he was extremely surprised by the power of his grandson, being thrown backwards. Garp! Sengoku exclaimed, before Luffy switched to 200 times speed and appeared in front of the Buddha, while he put his hand in front, but as soon as he received a punch with 200 times the strength of Luffy, he was immediately thrown back like a rocket. Boom! Fleet Vice Admiral. Hero Garp! The Marines exclaimed, stunned by that, not imagining how two of the strongest in the Navy were thrown like rockets by the rookie who suddenly became much stronger. I feel. Luffy murmured as his haki began to become more controlled at that moment. He began to reach a new level. He looked to one side, while Garp appeared at that moment. I've seen this before it happened. I can see the future. Luffy was quite surprised with this. His haki was auto-evolving as he had the desire to become stronger, although not complete, he had already reached a new level. He looked at his hand as the armament haki also manifested, being the advanced form of emission, one that he had been trying to reach in recent months, but it was extremely difficult. However, it finally began to appear. Just like the observation haki, it was not complete, but it had reached this level. His manifestation of the king's haki was also getting stronger. His layer was more solid than before. He felt increasingly in control of this bad situation. Garp advanced towards Luffy and he could almost see it in slow motion. He faced his grandfather head-on, with his punch reaching the face of the Navy hero with all his possible strength. Luffy. Save them. Luffy opened his eyes while hearing his grandfather's last words. It was obvious that Garp let Luffy finish him off this time so that he could also fight Saturn. Sengoku stood up on the other side of Manaford, seeing Garp destroy a part of the city with his body before falling to the ground and not getting up again. He tried to act, but quickly a ball of energy with purple flames advanced against him like a bullet. It came so fast that he didn't have time to react as the entire area exploded with him at the center. Luffy no longer wasted time with him as he moved to the front of the square with the fight with Saturn, while everyone had fallen back and Hancock tried to hold back the Elder so that he wouldn't kill anyone from Luffy's crew, but this put her in danger and Luffy had to act faster, even forcing his fruit, exceeding the previously established limit and making it enter 240 times his speed. Chapter 334, War 28. Everyone was beginning to fall before the power of Saturn. This Elder was fighting against everyone at once, and even under a great pressure from several simultaneous attacks, everyone could see he was barely getting hurt, no matter how much they attacked him. Then, at one moment, Zoro took advantage of an opening and cut him, severing one of his legs. However, everyone was shocked when Saturn's leg began to regenerate. He quickly threw Zoro back, making the swordsman crash against the ground, injuring him. The situation was not easy for the others either, especially when all had strength below that of Zoro. Even the giants were thrown around like dolls from the impact. Hugo received such a strong attack from Saturn that he fell out of his transformation while falling unconscious among the pirates. Saturn could also drain life energy with just his gaze, and this made numerous low-ranking pirates fall in the middle of the battle that was just beginning. Why is it so hard to beat him? Lucy murmured, as she leapt into the air and blew on her finger, inflating it and creating a giant hand like a balloon before launching her attack at the Elder. Saturn just saw this and merely scoffed while watching the insignificant attack, raising his hand before easily stopping it. Why is it so hard? Lucy murmured, gritting her teeth and quickly losing her attack. Saturn began to launch several fireballs towards the girl in the air with another ability from his own devil fruit. I won't let this happen. A voice exclaimed, and Ace quickly flew up in flames. Ace appeared in front of all of Saturn's fire attacks, which exploded in the air. AHH! Ace exclaimed, as he fell to the ground, surprising everyone since he was burned, even being a Logia of the body, he fell like a puppet on the ground, while looking trembling at his charred hands, wondering how this could be happening. Do you think I can't burn you? Saturn mocked. But even though you are the son of that man, you are not as important as the 4 people here. So you don't have my interest. Saturn mocked and saw Lucy fall at that moment beside him. He again went to launch his attack on Lucy, but all the Straw Hat members did not let it happen. Everyone used their greatest powers. Chua opened his mouth sending all the elements, Kuina throwing huge shards of ice, Nami and Vivi with the power of the wind, Nojiko punching with bombs, Robin transforming into her giant demon form, Zoro launching his dark cutting energies, Ecchi using 6 styles, Shirahoshi launching her trident, Alvida using her weapon, Chopper, punching him to the ground, Baby 5 launching all the missiles she could, and Jinbai launching his aquatic karate. It was not just them, also the division commanders, while Jazu, Vista, and the others launched their attacks at the same time, powerful enough to destroy a reinforced Gate of Justice, when launched together. Immediately, a huge explosion occurred in the square with Saturn in the middle of it, even blasting the wall that separated the bay from the square back, vaporizing it. Saturn seemed to evaporate, leaving a view to the frozen and destroyed bay with a huge smoke rising in the middle of the view. As the smoke began to dissipate, a shadow emerged again and Saturn appeared as if nothing had happened, recovering from the few cuts and injuries he had suffered as quickly as any econ fruit. You are so weak. He mocked. Immediately, he launched a shockwave and his unique flames, causing the whole area to explode. In the next moment, everyone was burned and thrown back, with several injuries. Chao Chu and Chopper also fell unconscious due to the injuries they endured, while the rest of the crew was burning. He quickly moved to grab one of them before retreating, burying them in the ground with his claw. This was none other than Lucy while her body was quite burned and injured. Being unable to do anything below the Elder, being squeezed and the only thing keeping her from being crushed was her body being made of rubber. I finally caught you. You are a potentially dangerous threat to leave alive, so it's time to end this. Saturn spoke, as he raised his leg, transforming it into a hockey spear, before launching it towards Lucy on the ground who could not react. But before he could kill her, he quickly lifted that leg even higher as another feather came running while slamming against him, pushing him back a few meters as he was dragged. This was Hancock, who had used all her strength in that attack. You bastard. Hancock landed on the ground, looking furiously at Saturn, who had not even been hurt, nor had he been petrified by the effect of the love fruit, just scoffing with his gaze. So you are betraying the Marines, 7 warlords of the seas? Saturn said with a dangerous tone. I will not let you hurt her. I will not let you kill her. She spoke with a determined look, not wanting to let her husband's sister die, as she did not want to see him sad. Very well, then come. You will die along with them. Saturn decided. Immediately, a fight started with Hancock, while Luffy was still fighting against two enemies at that moment. Hancock's fight against Saturn was disastrous. The girl was on the ground a moment later, while no one had yet recovered from the last attack and Lucy could not even stand up properly. Hancock was a bit hurt, while Saturn calmly approached to finish her. "You are pregnant," he accused, feeling the life growing in her womb. "But that does not matter, you will die here," he spoke, about to thrust one of his claws into the 7 warlords of the seas with Hancock looking at him furiously. But before anyone could intervene in that execution by Saturn, a swift shadow appeared, so fast that the ground exploded as it passed through the entire square. The Marines did not even notice what was happening, only realizing when the explosion threw them away. Luffy was feeling his body reaching the limit, even more now that he was surpassing all the limits of his fruits, but he did not care. He had gained a chance to unleash the true power and would not let Hancock die there, even if he had to use his body to defend her. And that was exactly what happened. Saturn could not react, while he was about to kill Hancock. Luffy appeared right in front, exploding the ground with his feet and was pierced by Saturn at that exact moment. Confused and surprised by the sudden explosion when he attacked Hancock. With the dust settling and Hancock opening her eyes, Saturn was also surprised to see Luffy in front of her, being pierced by his claw as it went through his chest. "Luffy!" Hancock exclaimed frightened. But it was not just her. Everyone looked shocked at that. "Luffy!" Lucy also screamed nearby, as she stumbled on the ground, looking frightened to see her brother in that state. "Luffy!" Ace trembled at that sight. "Luffy!" All his crewmates still standing and injured, looked frightened at the scene of their captain being pierced. Luffy coughed a little as blood ran down his lip and he looked at Hancock behind him. "Get out of here now," he ordered so firmly to the girl. "No. You are," she said trembling. "Get out now," Luffy shouted angrily at her, and Hancock, despite being enraged and frightened, nodded trembling and quickly moved away from him, grabbing Lucy who was also there and screaming for Luffy. Luffy looked at Saturn. "Yeah, you are here, you bastard." He cracked a bloody smile, while Saturn looked on with amazed eyes. "What was that speed? Not even I could react. It surpasses Kizaru many times," Saturn commented, frowning. "Like it, don't you?" Luffy taunted. "But this is just the beginning," he said as he began to grasp the feather on his chest. Luffy was careful not to hit his heart, as that would mean his death. Even with immense pain, he was satisfied that he succeeded in protecting the mother of his children and his children. Luffy felt Saturn's claw heat up at that moment, as he pulled it out of his chest, and threw it forward, with blood gushing from him in hemorrhage. His skin around the hole in his chest began to turn dark. "This is one of the effects of my power. You will die horribly," Saturn mocked, as he had something similar to Magellan when he used his awakening. All of Saturn's claws could generate this effect while the ground began to melt or corrode around him at that moment. "You are really dangerous, and I didn't expect to find someone like you here," Luffy said while spitting out some blood. He didn't seem to care about his wound. His skin began to darken, spreading like a virus. Everyone looked on in shock, even behind the screens, where everyone was speechless watching the events unfold in ways they did not anticipate. First, an elder in person was there, showing that the world government had such power in their hands, surpassing even the power of the Navy. And another moment, Luffy appeared there, looking like he was going to die in front of everyone. People were shocked, others cried at this moment, as they knew him. His crew was devastated seeing their captain in that state, but Luffy didn't seem to care about any of that. He appeared calm, and Saturn frowned when he saw the pirate's expression in front of him. Something was wrong and he didn't know what it was. In the end, Luffy had reached the limit of his body using 240 times his speed, but he was still far from finished. He would surpass what his body could endure even more until his people were out of here safely. After all, he still had one card left. He sighed. Even with that hole that seemed to have destroyed part of his lung, everything seemed to calm down for him at this moment. Luffy noticed that around him, everything began to disappear while darkness filled his surroundings. There, in front of him, in the middle of the darkness, lights began to appear, or rather, purple flames began to burn, while a gigantic creature stared at him with eyes between the flames and the darkness. "Do you want to use my power?" the voice asked, one that Luffy still remembered very well when he heard it for the first time, ancient and powerful. "Yes, I am ready to pay the price," Luffy spoke. "Alright, then use my power as much as you can use, and I will sleep after that. When you come back, I don't want to see the weakling you are again, since you don't have the capacity to use all my strength yet." The voice spoke and mocked Luffy. Luffy almost laughed at that. After all, his fruit was calling him a weakling even after reaching such a level, but he still had to admit he was far from the top of this world. He sighed and looked firm, even with the hole in the middle of his chest, and nodded to the creature while ignoring all the pain he felt. "Remember, I am not like the other econs. I will be the Lord of Chaos. The voice spoke again as the darkness around him began to change again and the flames he was seeing disappeared. Luffy found himself again in the middle of Manaford Square, while everyone stared at him breathlessly. Garp was scared in the distance joining his crew, while Whitebeard frowned. Luffy, who had stopped to sigh, lifted his head a few inches staring directly into Saturn's eyes. They shone as if everything was alright now, with the elder looking curiously at him. What is happening to him? He should be dying. Something isn't right. I feel something is coming. The elders began to speak among themselves telepathically, but Saturn immediately opened his eyes to Luffy, seeing his change faster than anyone else in the world. Suddenly, Luffy began to laugh softly while lowering his head and then burst out laughing loudly, leaving everyone confused and stunned with just his voice echoing in that destruction. He laughed looking up in the end, until he began to stop and finally stopped. Luffy looked forward and had an excited smile for Saturn. Let's start our real fight now. He spoke. The next moment, all the darkness that was reaching his skin suddenly began to disappear and the hole that Saturn had created, piercing several parts and various internal organs, began to be rebuilt in an instant. The next moment, his chest was normal in the time of a breath. Saturn looked stunned while Luffy felt something as a circle began to grow on his back with flames of chaos. He would finally awaken his fruit. Chapter 335, War 29. In the midst of all that situation, an explosion occurred the next instant, sweeping across the entire battlefield. Saturn, being the closest at the time, was the first to receive it. The explosion invaded all sides of the destroyed square, catching both the Whitebeard pirates and the Straw Hat crew members. Hancock still held Lucy as she moved away, quickly turned back, placing her hand a bit forward to shield herself from the wind created by Luffy, while her hair was thrown backwards. Lucy also looked dazed into the distance, not knowing what was happening. Ecchi and Bebo suddenly began to shrink, losing Luffy's ability and trying to shield themselves on the ground. The same could be said as ships began to fly out of Luffy's pocket, starting to grow and falling in the middle of the square. Nami and Kuina, already tired and injured from fighting Saturn, returned to their normal forms. Vivi, Nojiko, Alvida, and Baby 5 were there nearby the others, feeling the wind Luffy was creating. Luffy-sama. Shirahoshi exclaimed frightened to Luffy. She was still quite scared seeing the sight of the man she loved in a near-death state. Tears streaming with the wind blowing her hair. Zoro also jumped to his companions amidst the chaos, while looking at Choku, Hugo, and Chopper, lying on the ground. We need to get them, he said, his voice slightly muffled by the wind. At that moment, the wind began to swirl stronger, with yellow and red lightning simultaneously exploding in all directions. The Marines felt it soon after, while trying to hold firm. The vice admirals, a bit recovered but still injured, looked dazed towards the end of the square closest to the bay. What is this? Tsuru murmured next to the fallen vice admirals, as Yamato fought against Kizaru, looking towards Luffy. He's okay, Yamato said with a heavy heart, after having seen him being pierced, but he could do nothing at that moment as he was still fighting Kizaru. The three noticed Luffy passing by them at high speed, with no one even able to react. What is this? What fear? Kizaru murmured with a real sense of fear this time. Lami and Usopp, fighting against Akainu, also felt the wind and Haki at that moment, as Akainu looked on with narrowed eyes. Luffy's companions wondered what was happening to him at that moment. Kyuzen, Reijo, and Marco were also hit by the wave of Conqueror's Haki, which passed beyond the gap that Whitebeard had created, moving to the other side of the square. Meanwhile, the rest of the Marines, mostly with Sengoku and Garp, looked from a distance as Garp stood up and stared wide-eyed, his shoulder sagging. Luffy, he murmured, not understanding what was happening there and how his grandson had changed so much. Even Sengoku, who was standing, looked wide-eyed. Whitebeard, who was knocking down Teach again as he screamed in pain, felt the impact of the Conqueror's Haki, along with Teach's other crew members shielding themselves from the wind, as the strongest man in the world turned to look at the start of the square. This Conqueror's Haki was not limited just to that space. It began to explode more, spreading throughout all of Manaford, and advancing into the sea while generating opposing waves pushing the sea back. Thunders resonated throughout the place, with armament Haki and echoes of thunders from the time. This is much more powerful than the 7 users together. What is happening to this boy? Whitebeard murmured, surprised by Luffy's incredible sudden strength. Meanwhile, Saturn stood there, still firm, but still looking at that dazed. Luffy was in a transformation, while his skin turned purple as in the hybrid phase. This time, there were red symbols and a tongue that seemed unknown to anyone. It began to wrap around his entire body. His size was the same as the hybrid phase he had, but he felt that, instead of increasing his strength 6 times, it had multiplied by at least about 30 times, Luffy felt his personality change because of it, since, when a fruit awakens, he ends up assuming the form of the beast he completely ate. Luffy continued to release his haki as his head began to rise, starting to stare down Saturn in front of him. His observation haki had evolved, and he foresaw the future, seeing the future where Hancock had been pierced and likely killed along with her 2 daughters. This was enough to drive any man out of his sanity. Luffy looked at him as if he were the worst enemy to appear in his life. Luffy, who had already killed mercilessly, wanted to make this man suffer like no other he had fought. He wanted to make the man burn and scream. He wanted to make him regret having messed with him. He wanted to show this inferior being what happens when someone tries to destroy his descendants. "You're going to die here," was the only word Luffy spoke, while Saturn, although surprised, would scoff at what he heard. But the next moment, Luffy simply disappeared and Saturn felt his face being buried. The next moment, Luffy's punch seemed to even break reality as the space around him began to distort, burying the punch in Saturn's face, increasing his strength and speed 200 times each. A millisecond later, the entire area exploded, enveloping the entire square inches, cracks and debris flying into the sky as if someone was digging, and everyone there was caught by the attack, Saturn disappearing, flying with just one punch to the face of that elder. And suddenly, the entire bay exploded with him piercing the ground while continuing to fly downward. Nobody really saw what happened, they only saw the explosion emerging. Not even Zoro, there, could see, being the most proficient in haki. Everything happened without anyone being able to react. After all, a millisecond had passed since Luffy advanced. Saturn felt his nose and face cracking as he exploded, moving directly to the sea outside the ice. He didn't even know what was happening. And he couldn't even react with something breaking the ice near him and advancing as it surpassed. Luffy traveled the ice without any resistance, while his own body emitted a layer of heat burning the ice as if it were a sword piercing soft sand in an instant, since his flames had entered another level, entering the form that could consume matter with its high heat, corroding everything around him without even needing to touch it. He practically flew. And as soon as Saturn tried to regain consciousness once again, he felt the impact on his back, breaking all his bones and flying again, exploding that area. The entire ice of the bay suddenly exploded upwards with the force of Luffy. Everything happened in just 2 or 3 milliseconds while Luffy threw it to the bay and exploded the entire bay. No one could understand anything or even have a thought with all that happening, still trying to recover from the first attack that blew up the entire square while the bay and the ice flew everywhere. The bodies of the other 10 Ryobitos and unconscious Kong also flew to the sky with the ice. Luffy had destroyed the entire bay of ice with a single punch, while the sea, wanting to fill that waterless area, quickly wrapped against it. But as soon as it reached, it suddenly vaporized at the same instant without being able to touch him, generating an explosion of vapor. But he did not stay there for long, since he had to make that elder suffer more. Saturn was sent out towards him like a broken doll, flying above the ice, reaching 3,000 meters in less than 0.001 seconds. And as soon as he opened his eyes, Luffy was already there preparing to deliver an uppercut to him while his face distorted, stronger than any other. The punch was so powerful the next moment, that a part of the elder's mass simply disappeared from his body, while all the clouds around also vanished with just that punch, generating an impact so powerful that it emitted pressure in all directions. Saturn was sent flying towards space at a speed that no one could follow. The people of Manaford were still reeling from the square being destroyed by Luffy's first punch, when it suddenly stopped the next moment, as the impact of the third punch sent all the ice crashing back down instantly, causing everything to crumple under a pressure that no one knew where it came from. The entirety of Manaford felt the impact, as pirates and marines fell to the ground from the pressure coming from the sky, and even the sea itself was descending. The Tower of Justice simply sank, exploding into the ground along with the entire city. "What is this?" The strongest marines still managed to speak, but they were lying on the ground feeling the pressure crushing them. Garp was there, unable to keep up with everything, trying to withstand the pressure of his grandson with his knees on the ground to avoid being like most of the marines, crushed as their bodies seemed to bend against the concrete. The division commanders, admirals, and even the Straw Hat were on the ground, unable to move. The strongest could still be in a better position, but even Whitebeard, the most powerful in the world, was kneeling at this moment, looking at it with wide eyes. The entire sea of that area had been buried to the point that Manaford was showing its structure below it, from the earth to the concrete built. It was a surreal scene for everyone there. Buggy and all the prisoners were being crushed and frightened as they screamed, and even the Den Mushi seemed to shrink in its recording. Everyone watching had expressions from a second ago. After all this happened in less than a second. The pressure exploded and began to spread to all sides of the sea, while the clouds disappeared into the sea. Saturn was gushing blood as he flew among the clouds towards the planet's atmosphere. He didn't even know what was happening. It all happened in an instant and he didn't even have time to feel the pain of his shattered body at that moment. Luffy reappeared in front of him and punched him once more, and another impact explosion occurred 200,000 meters from the sea, creating another impact while the Elder flew towards the sky. They passed through the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, with Luffy feeling the temperature drop to minus 90 degrees Celsius, entering the thermosphere where the temperature increased, and finally they reached the exosphere. The temperature was so hot in this layer, not that it bothered Luffy, but the Elder had flames over his body. Saturn couldn't even enjoy the view of the planet he had now, with the entire orbit in front of him, close to finally leaving the planet's habitat and entering space. Luffy quickly followed him. With each step of his moonwalk, he was tens of kilometers away, and saw that the Elder was beginning to regenerate his body. "It's time to end this," he said as he approached the Elder, clenching his fist as he began to accumulate flames, much more than any attack Luffy had ever attempted. He delivered a punch while Saturn could only watch, his death coming in a way he couldn't have imagined when he left Mary Ejo's. Because Luffy simply struck him, the entire space around began to distort. Beyond the force he had accumulated, his emission and coating of the King's Haki. Saturn's body shattered, as he was sent directly into space, with the purple flames generating a beam like a comet flying out of the planet carrying the remains of Saturn's body. This attack was so powerful, that the pressure once again descended downwards and exploded all the clouds in the sky and created more pressure at the point below Luffy, being Manafort, the entire sea below once again, and everyone fell to the ground the next moment. Unaware of the chaos he had created thousands of kilometers below him, Luffy looked ahead. The entire world of One Piece was in front of him. He felt that his power was now on another level. That he could kill anyone he wanted in this world, but he also knew that this was temporary and had a price. He sighed and simply moved downward, disappearing the next moment. In just a few steps, Manafort under his pressure was in sight. He quickly advanced and landed on the island, but his landing simply broke the pressure and the entirety of Manafort began to rise at that moment, all arms of the moon in its way rising to the sky, throwing numerous pirates and marines around, while another part of Manafort also rose, exploding everything. People behind the screens began to look at it in shock. No one knew what to say about it, and what exactly was happening. It all happened in 2 seconds since Luffy's first attack on Saturn, making everyone there feel between high and low in such a short time. The entire chaos took a while to stabilize as Manafort had its axes twisted with raised parts, while the sea returned to its normal level, but this caused chaos throughout the sea. People in Sabeti looked to one side with a rumble coming, and suddenly a powerful wind hit the island, like all the islands around Manafort. This was the impact of the first punch on Saturn, taking him to the sky. A moment later, another explosion came from Luffy throwing Saturn into space, while everyone in the world could see a purple comet in the sky, seeming to move away from the planet. People screamed in fright, wondering if what they were seeing was real. No one could reason what they were seeing. Amidst the chaos, the dust settled and Luffy was in the middle of the raised place. Everyone looked at him with fear. "This is not possible, what kind of power is this?" People commented, whether they were marines or pirates, looking at him with conflicting feelings. It was almost as if they had seen a god among mortals. Luffy just kept looking up at the sky, searching for any sign of the Elder in that comet, if he was still alive. The entire world was shocked by this, and at that moment, Dragon was advancing while landing on one of the raised arms of Manafort's Bay, but no one even paid attention to him because everyone was focused on Monkey D. Luffy, or whatever that was now. Chapter 336, War 30. Boom! The sea finally surged upwards, creating chaos on the water's surface with splashes in every direction, making it seem like it was raining for a while, until things finally began to calm down. The sounds of explosions still echoed through the environment as the place finally began to settle, with debris stopping its descent. Manafort had lost all the glory it displayed just a few hours ago. The Tower of Justice was no more, the entire city had been devastated. It stood tilted, diagonally, the whole island had 3 sides up, and only a few lowered slightly, but still maintained a diagonal stance, showing the entire area in a state of destruction. How could this happen? The Marines murmured, clinging to various places to avoid falling down. No one there had imagined that such a thing could happen. The sailors looked again towards the being who had stopped in the middle of it all. Luffy maintained his form in awakening, his eyes fixed on the ground, but it was as if he was aware of everything happening around him at that moment, with nothing escaping his perception. Everyone looked, and most had a gleam of fear of what that pirate had now done to one of the elders of the world government, those who ruled the world. "This is the power of Luffy," Zoro murmured, so shocked he couldn't believe what he saw. He hadn't even seen what had just happened. "Luffy," Yamato murmured. "So this is the power of a true god." Onel's eyes were shining at this moment. He and other Logias felt the impact of Luffy's punch closer, as their bodies were smashed to the ground, transforming into their element. But even in this form, they could not escape the pressure. Enel felt imposing and now saw the true power of that demon. He had finally seen the point he aspired to reach. Garp was shocked in a corner, after rescuing some marines, being Helmpo and Kobe, who almost fell into one of the holes Luffy had created with his impact. Garp looked at his grandson, also shocked. Does he have that much power? He murmured, but soon narrowed his eyes, realizing that this was a temporary power. Luffy had done something that broke the limits of his fruits and body, meaning he would have to pay in some way. His gaze returned upward as he saw Luffy's father standing at a distance, looking at him with serious eyes. Did you come to rescue him too? He murmured, since Dragon wouldn't come here for Ace, his reason for coming here must be because of the elder himself and the danger that Luffy and Lucy were in. Lucy was shocked, still clinging to Boa Hancock, who also looked with stunned eyes, just like the others at her husband. Most couldn't believe it, wondering if the being there transformed was really Luffy, who remained silent the whole time. Luffy ignored them and his gaze passed to his father for a second, but he moved upward as the sky began to darken. He didn't even make a sound or speak as he saw a shadow approaching, and the others also looked at the same at that moment. Kaido had finally arrived at the war too. What is he doing here? Sengoku murmured, but not as shocked as he should have been. He had seen too much to be surprised by another four emperors appearing here. That's Kaido. The commanders of the Whitebeard divisions pointed to the sky. Kaido? The four emperors Su? Nami exclaimed, stunned. From a distance, Yamato opened her mouth, shocked, as she saw her father approaching, enveloping Manafort until finally emerging from the clouds. Yamato! Kaido exclaimed. What are you doing here? Yamato yelled angrily. I came to take you home, you ungrateful son. Kaido said. He was about to say more, as he was determined to grab Yamato and take her to Wano, but the next moment, there was an explosion in the middle of a destroyed island, with something being launched flying towards Kaido as the dragon was surprised by Luffy shooting into the sky and seeing a man transformed into his beast form in front of him. He looked surprised and didn't even have time to react when he received a punch right on the side of his cheek, creating an impact that generated another force of wind, but not as powerful as the attack. Am I bleeding? How is this possible? Kaido couldn't believe what he was feeling as blood came out of his mouth from the punch, and as he flew upward, he felt someone grabbing his tail and, before he could continue, he was immediately pulled down as Luffy spun him around, leaving everyone in Marineford stunned by that scene. Even Whitebeard was looking at it with wide eyes, since he didn't expect Kaido's visit, let alone this development. Kaido was thrown to the ground the next moment, while his body, a snake hundreds of meters long, exploded directly in the middle of the pirates and marines, creating another explosion, cracking more of the place and destroying even more structures of Marineford. Luffy decided to act immediately after. He was at his time limit in his transformation, feeling his strength decreasing more and more. He only had 30% of the strength he had fought with against Saturn at this moment, so he would use these last moments to finish Kaido before he could hurt someone from his crew or even take his wife, Yamato. This bastard! Kaido murmured as his huge body began to shrink with all the marines watching him shrink. He appeared in the middle of the smoke a moment later in his hybrid form with blood running down his forehead and lips. His gaze fixed on Luffy still in the air, with Kaido narrowing his eyes. Kaido. An explosion resounded with a voice with a tone of anger, as Whitebeard slammed his weapon on the ground, creating a tremor. What are you doing here? Whitebeard was furious with Kaido appearing in the war. As much as I want to fight you, old man, you are finished. Kaido turned to Whitebeard and mocked, seeing him full of wounds. But I am not interested in you or your crew. What I want is my son back. He said as Yamato landed on the ground and raised her weapon. That's not going to happen, old man. Yamato spoke. She was finally free, she had seen the world she always wanted to see, met people, and even fell in love. She wouldn't return to that life in Wano again. She didn't want it and neither did Luffy. After all, he moved the next moment, distorting the air with his high speed, and the next moment, an explosion emerged as Luffy exploded the ground in front of Kaido, facing him. Kaido looked at him raising an eyebrow. Luffy hadn't spoken any word since he awakened his fruit, so he continued in silence. So you are Monkey D. Luffy. The one who married my daughter. Kaido murmured. You are really strong, stronger than I imagined. But I am the strongest creature in the world. He spoke seeing the blood on his hand before turning back to the pirate. But I admit, no one should be able to injure me so easily. He murmured. Kaido even felt powerful beings for a moment as he approached Marineford, but saw that one of them had disappeared. Luffy said nothing again and simply exploded the ground, advancing. Kaido didn't waste time, drew his weapon, and struck vertically at Luffy, but the straw had easily dodged quickly, while Kaido kept striking, and received a punch from Luffy, sending him flying into the sky. The next moment, Luffy reappeared by his side, with Kaido unable to do anything. looking surprised with pain and surprise, and was struck once more from behind, flying straight. Luffy appeared on the other side, punching him again. This started an aerial beating where Luffy began to occur through the air, punching Kaido from one side to the other. Luffy. Dragon watched from a distance as his son beat a 4 Emperor Su, unable to do anything but be struck. As the entire world still saw only flashes racing across the high area of Manafort, Luffy was now beating one of the most powerful enemies in front of the entire world. He's reaching his limit. Whitebeard noticed something, and he would have helped the rookie deal with the dragon, but suddenly enemies began to appear around him, with Teach taking advantage of that moment of distraction, attacking him. However, Whitebeard quickly started to fight him as well, continuing his battle against Teach and his crew. Yamato watched Luffy fight her father, surprised, unable to do anything as a light appeared beside her. Kizaru was trying to attack and Ino quickly defended her. "Hey, pay attention to the devil, focus on the fight," he complained, and Yamato nodded, returning to fight Kizaru again. The other pirates were still standing, but Zoro was the first to act. "Hey, everyone. Grab the idle ships and put them in the bay," he quickly exclaimed, as everyone there went to the ships that had come out of Luffy's pocket and groaned due to him losing control of his fruit upon awakening. "Leave it to me." Jazu started to pick up one of the ships, lifting it with his own strength. There were Black Pearl, Sunny Go, Enel's barge, the ship from the Goa Kingdom, a ship of a Tenri Obito, and the ship of Germa 66 with a huge snail. Everyone also helped while Nami grabbed one of them, assisting with her giant claws, and others also pushing it through the openings in the wall. There were still 6 Tenri Obitos trapped in the sail of the main ship, but no one seemed to care about that. "Hey, we need to get oars out of here," Ace exclaimed, being another who had come out of Luffy's pocket and had grown along with the ships. The pirates quickly began to push him out of the bay. "Don't let the pirates get out." The Marines clamored and began trying to advance as everyone started to retreat, with the Straw Hat members taking the unconscious to their main ship. Black Pearl finally fell into the water as the crew members jumped onto it. "Garp. We can't let them get out," Sengoku exclaimed, since he had 3 options: help the admirals, interfere in Luffy's fight with Kaido, or deal with Whitebeard. Choosing to deal with the fleeing pirates, leaving the pirates to kill each other. Garp didn't want to act, but he had no choice. However, just as they were about to advance, a figure flew in front of them, preventing them at least from going to Luffy and the other pirates. "Dragon." Garp murmured seeing who had landed, and Sengoku frowned deeply. "You can't let these people go sailing." Dragon spoke looking at his father. "Chief Dragon." Imkov shouted surprised from afar as he entered the Black Pearl. "Look, it's the world's worst criminal." Reporters quickly began taking pictures and writing things, as bizarre as the events were. Luffy still continued to beat Kaido, but his punches began to lose strength. He was down to just 5% of his explosive strength, and Kaido finally managed to breathe easier. "This bastard. I didn't know he was so strong." Kaido murmured in the air, still being beaten. He was drenched in blood and wounded, not imagining that he would be beaten by anyone here, but he finally began to react to an increasingly weaker Luffy. Luffy was losing his strength at that moment. He felt that he could no longer hurt Kaido, and Kaido was finally able to defend himself, before striking Luffy with his weapon clad in Haki with Black Thunder, and he was immediately thrown to the ground. Luffy coughed up blood as his body began to lose the effect of awakening, and Kaido took this opportunity to strike him, advancing to the ground. "Come on. Get out of here, I need a bit more strength," Luffy murmured as his teleportation jutsu ed between awakening and normal form, as if he was commanding but his current condition did not allow it. Kaido approached at that moment with his strike. "Ray my hack," he exclaimed as he approached the ground, and just as he reached the Straw Hat, an explosion emerged and someone reappeared, striking against Kaido's weapon. Luffy lay on the ground as he began to completely lose his awakened transformation again. He saw the strongest man in the world engaging in a battle above him with Kaido, with the Conqueror's Haki causing explosions everywhere. Whitebeard had just simply blown up Teach and the others while everyone seemed to be fallen on the side of the destroyed part of the city. From the ground, Luffy watched in surprise. "So, this is a battle between 4 emperors," he murmured while beneath the impact of the 2 weapons that weren't even touching. Whitebeard and Kaido momentarily distanced themselves from each other. Whitebeard might have been at a disadvantage against Kaido before, but now he was also severely beaten by Luffy. "Do you need help, kid? You'd better get out of here," Whitebeard said while waiting for the next attack. Luffy struggled to his feet, finding a bit of strength to do so. He raised his hand and tried to generate purple flames, but they appeared briefly and easily extinguished. "Seems like I've lost that ability for a while," Luffy murmured, feeling that his econ was no longer there. Once again, Whitebeard and Kaido clashed. And Luffy moved away while looking towards his companions, Apart from the battles with the admirals, all of them were boarding the ships as soon as they were placed in the bay. A group of vice admirals began to approach them to prevent it, while Luffy sighed and finally spoke again. "Lami, prepare to get everyone out of here," Luffy exclaimed, as Lami, still fighting against Ecchi, nodded. It was time to finally start retreating from Maniford. Chapter 337, War 31. Lami heard Luffy and nodded. Finally, the moment had come for them to leave Maniford. She quickly began to create her room, expanding it across the battlefield. Meanwhile, Luffy couldn't help but look at his father there, keeping Garp and Sengoku occupied, while the ships were starting to leave the bay. He nodded at that and began running towards the end of the plaza, feeling Momonga appear beside him with his sword. He was quite injured, but that was normal after all his wounds on the battlefield. Luffy only had his body's abilities at that moment, with his devil fruits losing their effect. His cloak was all torn at this point, and he quickly discarded it while Momonga cut the cloak, with Luffy using it as a decoy. Momonga saw Luffy appear right next to the cloak, surprised as he received a punch coated with Luffy's haki. The Vice Admiral flew back at that moment, exploding the ground. Luffy resumed running through the destruction, shirtless. "We won't let you get out of here." Another Vice Admiral, Strawberry, tried to cut him while he moved his body, seeing the future, and turned his body, with the knife passing by his side. He was about to punch seeing the opening, but quickly turned to the side as someone appeared with instant transmission and punched him with haki. Tsuru hit Luffy, crossing his arms while falling back and exploding the ground. But Luffy quickly started running again. "We have to stop him," Tsuru exclaimed, still standing in place, seeing Luffy pass by another side. "I won't let you go, Mugiwara." Dalmatian appeared at that moment, ready to punch him. "I want to see you try." Luffy, despite being beyond his limit after the fights, ran while advancing with emission haki. A clash between the two fists made the area explode, and Luffy began to gain the upper hand. Dalmatian quickly felt himself being pushed back before flying away. "We have to stop him. He can't get out of here alive. You saw the power he showed, but now he's in a weakened state. We must stop him at any cost," exclaimed the other vice admirals. "Let's stop them." The low-ranking soldiers who stayed on that side and could still fight exclaimed while starting to aim at Luffy. He saw this and quickly unleashed Conqueror's haki in that area, making everyone fall unconscious. "I am forcing my hakis too much. I will have to use only the 6 styles," Luffy thought while passing by the fallen marines and reaching the edge of the precipice Whitebeard had created, with the plaza forming of E due to the explosion Luffy created when landing from space. He jumped and started using Moonwalk to rise into the air. At that moment, Tsuru, Doberman, Strawberry, Cancer, Mozambia, and giant rear admirals with Commodores attacked Luffy while he dodged blows from guns, abilities, and blades trying to hit him. Luffy used Moonwalk, instant transmission, and even Iron Body to hold back the blows and avoid using haki. Luffy turned to them all and showed his fingers in a pistol formation. Several finger pistol were fired, hitting some of them and throwing them back. A giant tried to hit him. While dodging, Luffy launched a Tempest Kick with a kick, throwing the giant away with his weight, exploding the ground. While this was happening, several cracks appeared, and waves of haki began to destroy the ground due to Whitebeard's fight against Kaido and Dragon's fight against Garp and Sengoku. Luffy started dodging the blades of some vice admirals using instant transmission and moonwalk quickly, finally landing on the other side of the gap and beginning to advance towards the bay again, running. Another vice admiral tried to hit him from the side, but he dodged, and Tsuru appeared again, with Luffy making a move at the last second. However, a third vice admiral managed to hit him with a haki punch. Even being dragged with his arms crossed, Luffy didn't waste time and regained his balance before continuing to run while the vice admirals quickly ran after him using moonwalk. The vice admirals were no longer at their peak, so they weren't a powerful enough challenge to stop Luffy, even together and with him no longer using his devil fruits. A vice admiral landed in front of Luffy, who attacked as he dodged the blow and grabbed the opponent by the arm, pushing him over his shoulder and throwing him on top of the other vice admirals who were coming after. But Luffy didn't stop there. He simply pointed both closed fists at the man still suspended in the air and falling backwards, launching a strike. Rokugan. He unleashed the 7th technique of the 6 styles for the first time in battle since he learned it. The tips of his 2 fists generated a vortex explosion, hitting that vice admiral, whose eyes turned white in the next moment as he fell defeated and advanced towards his companions, with the explosion hitting all the other vice admirals at that moment, throwing them back. Luffy sighed a bit and kept running. Now there were low-ranking soldiers and admirals fighting against his companions on this side of the square. "Lami!" Luffy exclaimed, now able to enter the space she created. Lami heard Luffy and quickly started moving everyone inside her space with the Operation Fruit model, modification human. She, Usopp, Marco, Reiju, Enel, and Yamato disappeared with Luffy, reappearing at the edge of the square, near the exit. The ships now in the middle of the sea were starting to depart, all full of pirates leaving the square, but there were more ships at the edge of the bay where other pirates could take them. Even the Moby Dick, which had fallen after Luffy exploded the ice in one corner, the Whitebeard pirates began to fill it as they reached it. This also happened with the marine ship that the prisoners from Impel Down had come on, with them on the ships and buggies still filming Manfred from that angle. The admirals saw the seven fleeing and did not stand still. They quickly began to move, with Kizaru appearing in the sky and launching light rays downward. Enel also fired lightning bolts, which clashed with the light, but it wasn't enough. Since some flashes of light came out through the gaps, and the lightning exploded all over the ground. Lami again used her power and made everyone disappear from the attack, reappearing a little further away, closer to the bay than before. At that moment, Aokiji created an ice barrier between them and the sea, but Reiju and Usopp started firing fire and light rays while exploding the barrier, creating a breach that delayed them only for a few moments, as they passed through it. "Come on, we're almost there," Luffy said, and the next moment, he looked back, seeing a rain of lava falling on them. "Kizaru, you know what to do." "Okay," Inu exclaimed. "I should separate one of them, right?" Kizaru commented in his comedic tone. All the Straw Hats stopped at this moment as they began to strike the lava rain falling on them. Lightning, light, and fire mixed, and Luffy helped by punching with his custom finger pistol, launching vacuum waves by punching the air. It was at this moment, as Lami was about to teleport them again, that Kizaru appeared in the middle of them. Before they could react, he kicked Luffy, who shot to the side of the bay, only having time to cross his arms, while Kizaru was quickly hit by several members who struck him in the next moment with anger, sending him flying back, with blood spilling several meters away. He exploded the ground with his body and did not get up from there, making the Marines wonder if he had been defeated like that, which was no surprise when he moved amidst so many hockey users. "Luffy!" his companions exclaimed, but quickly an ice wall reappeared, separating them from their captain. Luffy saw this from a distance, trying to get up still hurt. "Go away. I'll find a way," he shouted, as a lava explosion happened next to him, with Akainu walking up to him calmly. "You seem to have lost all your strength." Akainu taunted with a deadly gleam in his eyes. Luffy stared at him with narrowed eyes. "I'm not afraid of you even in this state. And what can I do? I just faced several forces at the same time, unlike you, a coward who likes to scheme but runs away when cornered." Luffy mocked, despite not being in a very favorable position against Akainu. "You talk as if you're still going to get out of here alive. I will kill you for daring to kill a Tenri Obito and an elder. You are a greater threat than anyone else who has appeared in this world, and I will be the one to destroy you." Akainu said, positioning himself as a kind of hero, but Luffy wanted to laugh at his hypocrisy. The Straw Hats tried to destroy the ice barrier, but new ice walls emerged, as Akainu was determined not to let them pass, not even attacking them but ensuring they were kept separated. "This is an order from your captain," Luffy suddenly exclaimed again. "Return to the ships and leave the bay." He wanted to reinforce this, as his companions didn't seem to obey him. They nodded hesitantly, but they had no choice but to obey their captain. Lami disappeared with the others while Luffy sighed. Luffy faced Akainu, keeping a smile. He could no longer use healing on his body, while he was bruised in various parts. Suddenly, Luffy's Den Mushi started to ring. "Can you give me a second?" Luffy mocked Akainu, as an explosion of lava occurred right where he was, making him jump back. Another lava strike, from a giant fist, tried to hit him, but he dodged and grabbed the ringing Den Mushi and answered it. "Luffy, come here immediately!" Nami exclaimed, her face on the Den Mushi looked scared, but it wasn't that simple. "Luffy!" Another voice emerged. Luffy heard the tone of concern in Hancock, seeming like she was feeling unwell. "Luffy! Luffy! Lucy seems scared." "Luffy! We're coming!" Ace exclaimed. "Wait a little longer, Captain," Zoro said. "No," Luffy said calmly, dodging another blow from Akainu, careful not to touch any drops of lava. "I want you to stay there, but I need a favor, pass the Den Mushi to Bippo," he requested. "Captain," Bippo said immediately, now without his black power, looking scared and worried. "Bippo, remember when we talked before coming here? That thing I asked for?" Luffy said, as Bippo seemed to hesitate. "Yes, Captain. I want you to do exactly that," Luffy said. Bippo had everyone else looking at him confused, while he seemed hesitant, looking towards Manfred. Luffy had asked him to mark the island with his power as soon as they touched the square. He raised his hand and pointed, while all of Manfred suddenly started to tremble. Initially, those there thought it was Whitebeard's power, but even he was looking surprised at this, And Manafort was not just shaking but starting to levitate. The heart of marine justice, now a broken V-shaped structure, began to rise, separating from the solid land and staying suspended in the air while it continued to ascend. Sengoku looked worriedly at Garp and the other marines. The island began to levitate, and disappeared to the whole world, as Buggy continued filming from the ship they had boarded. The whole world saw the final unfolding of the war. As the island continued to rise, Luffy looked satisfied, and Akainu seemed quite frustrated. Let's continue. Luffy looked at Akainu. It's time for you to pay, with no way to escape this time, he said, closing his eyes. I need one more second of my powers, it's all I ask, he murmured, opening his eyes, which became redder, staring at his prey in front of him. Akainu would suffer as Luffy began to transform again. Chapter 338, War 32. Luffy's skin began to turn purple again, as red runes reappeared on his body, encircled by flames on his back. What? Akainu was surprised to see Luffy transforming again. Luffy said nothing and simply blasted the ground, Akainu's confidence quickly turning into a pained expression as his body was battered by Luffy, his bones beginning to break with his chest being hit. I don't have much time, Luffy thought and quickly drew his sword, aiming to completely sever Akainu's head in slow motion, the entire place exploding just from his movement. Akainu saw his death approaching at that moment, while Kyuzen looked stunned at the development and even tried to get close, but it was already too late. Die, Luffy said as his blade neared Akainu's neck. However, Akainu tried to use his last resort, exploding into lava like a volcano in all directions. Luffy saw this but continued, knowing the lava wouldn't hurt him. The lava erupted everywhere at that moment and another explosion occurred.